Chapter 889. Shu Fu's sword formation was an anomaly to the entire Xiuzhi world, and an unprecedented beginning. In the history of the Xiuzhi world, there had never been a sword formation with such a large number of people. Large numbers meant complexity, and the amount of primal energies of the universe they could attract would increase. Also, while each swordsman in this sword formation was young, they had reached the level where they could control flying swords. The rapid flying sword could create countless vortexes in the air with every breath, causing countless surges of yuan qi to surge. When these forces could condense into one, it was undoubtedly terrifying to the extreme. But Qian Mu's Black Mountain was an unprecedented anomaly to the Xiuzhi world. Shu Fu's sword formation could be said to be the most important thing the Qin dynasty army relied on right now, even more important than the Nether Float Fleet itself. It could deal with many Realm 7 Grandmasters at the same time, and easily kill them. But what about dozens, or even close to 100, Realm 7 Grandmasters who were lifeless, who did not know pain or fear, and who completely obeyed the will of one person? In the past, no one knew the result. But now, everyone would quickly see the result. The power of the whirlpools of sword energy gathered on the dozens of sword lights. These sword lights were as bright as stars in the day, and easily tore apart the thick yin energy around these cultivators, turning the grey-black energy into weak streams of flame, and then collided with the weapons in the hands of these cultivators, or the energy they had gathered. In a flash, the sound of countless mountains colliding sounded. The solid wooden wall outside the barracks was easily shattered into countless wood shavings. The flying swords flying out of the sword formation clearly had the advantage. Several corpse cultivators were directly pierced through, and then violently torn to pieces by the surging sword lights. Other than these corpse cultivators that were torn to pieces, when the flying swords were retracted, at least half of the corpse cultivators that charged out of the Black Mountain Bell had wounds of various sizes. Some of them had terrifying sword holes on their bodies, some of them were missing limbs, and some of them even had half of their faces cut off. But even so, the masters of the flying swords in the camp trembled in fear, and some even started to cry. The vital energy of these heavily injured corpse cultivators was also dissipating. Inky black energy seeped out of the wounds like blood, but they still moved forward. The flying swords that had just flown through their bodies quickly dimmed. When the sword boys controlling these flying swords poured their vital energy into the seal scripts of these flying swords, the unusual vibrations even affected their energy seas. The vital qi of yin spirits and ghosts already had the terrifying ability to corrupt flying swords and destroy runes, let alone the vital qi of the Thousand Tombs Mountain. When a flying sword was like an eagle with injured wings, how could it be able to perfectly draw out the sword Dao? Shu Fu's face was exceptionally pale. He really wanted to remind his disciples that the only way to turn defeat into victory was to gather all their strength and kill the black-robed young man who was controlling the Thousand Tombs Mountain. However, even if he spoke, it would be too late. A stern shout came from the depths of the Black Mountain. With this shout, the Black Mountain expanded violently, giving people the feeling that it was about to explode. Boom! The corpse cultivators, who were heavily injured and had their vitality leaking out, directly self-destructed from the depths of their bodies. Balls of terrifying black yuan qi wreaked havoc in the air with unimaginable violent power. Behind the violent black yuan qi, there was a series of heart-palpitating crashing sounds. The remaining corpse cultivators were like hungry ghosts that had eaten fresh food. Their power rose again, and then they poured out all the power in their bodies. An unimaginable scene appeared in front of the camp. The yuan qi produced by the explosion did not completely disperse. Instead, it was twisted into waves by the force behind it. It was as if huge demonic palms were formed in the air. In an instant, they traversed a distance of several thousand feet and smashed into the sword formation. Before the yin spirits and ghosts smashed down, more tender cries sounded from the sword formation. Hundreds of flying swords crazily shuttled through the air, forming a sword net. The black energy that was like an enormous demonic arm pressed down like a mountain. These flying swords fell slightly, but the sword lights managed to hold on. There were continuous explosions in the air, giving people the feeling that city walls were collapsing, and the earth was shaking. But the sword lights on these flying swords were dimming, and the trembling of the flying swords inside the sword lights gradually grew stronger. Shu Fu's face turned from white to grey. He was the cultivator most familiar with this sword formation, so he knew victory was decided. If the cultivation of these sword boys was stronger, the vital energy on the flying swords more stable, and the primal energies of the universe more powerful, they may be able to exhaust the energies of the Black Mountain and the corpse cultivators. But now, these sword boys could not. When a hole appeared in the sword formation, it would bring death and injury. The greatest difference between a sword formation and an individual cultivator was that such an enormous sword formation, if one person died, could not form the formation. Right now, this sword formation was in the process of slow death. When the ghostly energies reached the point where one of the flying swords could not be controlled, the battle would end. At this time, Shu Fu finally understood the meaning of Ding Ning having him come to watch this battle. Because he possessed this sword formation, he was naturally very proud. Before something like this happened in front of him, he would not agree to any of Ding Ning's conditions. The zither whimpered. As this sword formation slowly died, Shu Fu did not know what to feel or how to speak. On the other side of the camp, a patch of black bamboo formed out of thin air. A red-robed woman walked out of the black energy, holding a zither. When she was 50 steps away from him, she bowed to him from a distance and gave her thanks. Official Shu, thank you for your care these years. This girl knows that without Elder Shu's care, I would not be safe in Changling's fish market. The red-robed woman was naturally the eldest miss of the Shong family. After she gave her thanks, she asked softly, "But Elder Shu, have you ever thought, is this worthy of the Shong family?" The appearance of the eldest miss of the Shong family caused countless past events to come. Shu Fu's mind was completely blank. After this question, his body froze, and he could not even breathe. Is there really no need to care about right and wrong, and no one is worthy of another? The eldest miss of the Shong family still spoke in a serene tone. You are my father's good friend, and one of my father's most trusted people. Even though you did not know when Changling made the Shong family the scapegoat, after so many years, you are still loyal to the people who destroyed the Shong family. In order to achieve your goal, you do not even need any personal emotions. Then what you want to do in the future, I presume, is not important. Yuanwu will lose. You should wake up. Take these sword boys and leave Changling. If you still cannot leave the empire, I will give you an ocean, and you can build one yourself. At this time, Yang Tai Guanjian said to him and then explained softly, this is what Ding Ning said to you. Yuanwu will lose. You should wake up. Take these sword boys and leave Changling. If you still cannot leave the empire, I will give you an ocean, and you can build one yourself. At this time, Yang Tai Guanjian said to him and then explained softly, this is what Ding Ning said to you. Chapter 890. He does not completely understand me, and Miss Shong cannot either. Shu Fu was silent for a long time. He looked at Yang Tai Guanjian and said, it is not that I cannot leave, but that I have done many things, paid many prices, and do not want everything to be lost. Yang Tai Guanjian frowned slightly. He did not respond to Shu Fu's words. He turned to look at the sword formation that was in danger and said softly, as a junior, I do not qualify to lecture elder. Now is the time for you to make a choice. This sentence still couldn't be considered polite, but it was very honest. Ding Ning did not want to talk to Shu Fu, and did not want to hear Shu Fu's thoughts. Ever since the change in Changling, when Shu Fu started to take sides, he and Shu Fu were enemies. He just wanted Shu Fu to make a choice. Either leave, or let him and his sword formation be buried with Yuanwu. Because the cultivators who formed these sword formations were too young, and because Shu Fu had been overseas for years, far away from the conflicts of the last decade, Ding Ning had left him much face. Just like the joke Li Sai had played with Jing Liuli before his death. You thought he had a story, but he did not leave any behind. In the world, there were only results. Only those who cared about you would care about your feelings and emotions. After the stage ended, who would care if the performer's face was happy or sad? Yang Tai Guanjian's attitude towards Shu Fu was just a polite reminder. I am leaving. Shu Fu smiled bitterly. He started to have the same emotions as Bai Shanshui and the others. Before this great play ended, He seemed to have become a spectator. But in the next moment, his gaze turned sharp, and the cold light in his eyes contained anger. Why are you not stopping? He had agreed to Ding Ning's conditions. But the black energies of the corpse cultivators were still howling like ghosts, and terrifying power was still falling towards the sword formation. The frightened sobs in the sword formation grew chaotic. You can leave, but there is no need to keep these swords, Yang Tai Guanjian responded coolly. Xu Fu's expression changed. He wanted to say something, but did not in the end. Some of the sword lights finally scattered. Just one sword light scattered, and the entire sword formation ceased to exist. However, when the sword formation collapsed and cries rang out from within, all of the black chi scattered and condensed into one. It was like a huge hand had grabbed and clenched, and it swept all of the flying swords back into the Thousand Tombs Mountain. In the next moment, all of the corpse cultivators retreated back into the Thousand Tombs Mountain with the black chi, vanishing without a trace. There were still thousands of tombs on Thousand Tombs Mountain, but there were many decaying little swords stuck in them. The Thousand Tombs Mountain returned to its deathly silence. The black-robed youth Qian Mu stood silently and then bowed slightly to Yang Tai Guanjian. Yang Tai Guanjian solemnly returned the greeting. Qian Mu disappeared into the black energy. Goodbye means we'll never meet again. The young miss of the Shong clan also bowed gracefully to Xu Fu. When she raised her body again, the black bamboo forest around her was in full bloom, full of black bamboo flowers. Even with the yin energy swirling around her, it still gave people a feeling of extraordinary splendor. When everyone's gazes were attracted, in the next moment, the figure of this red-robed woman faded into the air. Only the sobbing sound of a zither came from the distance. This zither sound caused many soldiers in the camp to recall many matters of the Shong clan. Many people felt sorrow. Those crying boys and girls saw Xu Fu's figure clearly through their tearful eyes. Immediately, someone among them shouted, and they all rushed out in unison, gathering around Xu Fu and bumping into him. Xu Fu's chest was filled with boundless frustration, but when he was suddenly bumped into by a few young boys and girls, his heart was suddenly relieved, and he heaved a sigh of relief. His ambition for supremacy was just like those short-lived black bamboo flowers, like a dream or an illusion. Let's go, everything is fine. He heard the thunderous roars of serpents in the sky and immediately understood. He waved his hand at these boys and girls and walked towards the black clouds. The dark clouds circling in the sky landed in the wilderness outside the barracks. A storm of rain fell. When the black clouds disappeared, Yang Tai Guanjian was long gone. Xu Fu and the hundreds of boys and girls had disappeared as though they had never existed here. Xu Fu and Xu Fu's sword formation were the strongest thing the Qin dynasty relied on. This had once been the source of confidence in defeating the Yang Qi army. This was because there was no army that could defend against a siege with such a sword formation. In many people's view, unless many cultivators like Bai Shanshui, Yi Xileng, and even Ding Ning worked together, they could suppress this sword formation. But just like how no one had expected Zheng Xiu and Yuanwu to be wounded, no one had expected this sword formation to disappear so easily and quickly. The news spread to all parts of the world. Ding Ning learned of Xu Fu's choice in Jiaodong Commandery. He knew that the soaring snakes of Jiaodong Commandery were taking Xu Fu and these boys and girls, who he did not want to see again, to a port in the seas outside Jiaodong Commandery. Xu Fu's choice was not out of his expectations. From a certain perspective, when Xu Fu received his letter, he did not mobilize cultivators with great fanfare, but instead rushed to meet up with the sword formation at the first possible moment. This was enough to show that the position of the sword formation in his heart was not purely a weapon of war. This meant that in Xu Fu's mind, between Yuanwu and these children who had been together for more than a decade, these boys and girls still had the advantage. Regardless of why Xu Fu had chosen to stand on Yuanwu and Zheng Xiu's side many years ago, maybe because he felt that what was done, and did not want to go against the current. But at least now, Ding Ning thought that Xu Fu's final choice was following his heart. Ding Ning started to write again. He did not write to Xu Fu, who he would never see again, but to Xie Changsheng, who was at the Qin border. At this time, all the cultivators in the world knew that he was the former Wang Jingmeng, and Ding Ning's name was fading. But in Xie Changsheng's view, The Wang Jingmeng of the past was too far away from him, and he did not feel anything. In the letters he wrote to Ding Ning, he still thought that Ding Ning was that youth of the same generation he was familiar with in Falling Parasol. Many of the letters he wrote to Ding Ning were not important military intelligence, but just teasing and idle chatter. Ding Ning smiled as he replied to Xie Changsheng's teasing. In the past, the ancient dynasties paid attention to virtue, and ruled the world with virtue. They did not use weapons, but it was not that they did not cultivate martial arts, but they used martial power to intimidate people, and virtue to win people over. Not using weapons is just solving things without using weapons. If there are other ways to solve things, then not using weapons, and not truly not using weapons. It seemed to be idle chatter, but these conversations contained Yuanwu's feelings in the imperial palace under Li Mountain, and some of the words Yuanwu had said. Before the change in Changling in the past, many people on the Basin Kendo ground had not detected it. They did not know that their words and actions had been silently observed by Zheng Xiu and Yuanwu. But many years later, everything was reversed. A military intelligence report had been sent to the imperial palace under Li Mountain earlier. In the palace filled with medicinal energy, Yuanwu looked down at the letter that reported the disappearance of Xu Fu and the sword formation. Earlier, an urgent secret letter had come from the Yang, telling him that Bai Qi had disobeyed the imperial decree, and entered the Qi territory with his troops, and was no longer under Changling's jurisdiction. Chapter 891. In the empty black hall, Yuanwu's hand drooped down. His hand seemed to be unable to bear the weight of a thin piece of parchment, and his neck seemed unable to bear the weight of his head. His head drooped even lower. Many years ago, he had given people the feeling of mediocrity, but in all aspects, he surpassed most people in the world. Bai Qi had disobeyed the imperial decree and led the army into the Qi realm. Naturally, he had rebelled and taken away more than a third of the Qin dynasty's army. The support needed for hundreds of thousands of elite troops was not just Bai Qi's idea. Who could satisfy such a large amount of supplies? It didn't take him long to figure out who could provide enough support for Bai Qi. So he knew that after Bai Qi destroyed the Qi dynasty, the troops loyal to the Qin dynasty would not return to serve him. He also knew that Ding Ning had forced Xu Fu away not just to force away the important power from his side, but more importantly, to tell him that from Changling to the Qin dynasty, all the information and secret military orders were no longer safe. He was losing control of the Qin dynasty's army, and even the entire court. It was like a 100-legged worm that had its legs slowly being chopped off one by one. The slow deprivation and torture was very cruel. But Yuanwu did not feel this was unfair, because in the past, he and Zhang Xiu had forced Wang Jingmeng like this. Heavy footsteps came from outside the hall. Along with the familiar footsteps, a strong smell of medicine stimulated his nostrils and made him feel a little numb. It was time to take medicine again. He took a deep breath and raised his head. Zhao Jiao, holding a medicine bowl with both hands, walked in front of him. Then he took this pure gold medicine bowl and sipped like he was drinking wine. The medicine was bitter and astringent, but when the medicine entered his stomach, a ball of energy burned like fire in his stomach and spread to all parts of his body. Some parts of his body that seemed to be dead and rotten started to recover under the effects of the medicine energy. Zhao Gao's medicine was very effective. In his blood vessels, the remnants of Zheng Xiu's astral yuan qi had already been mostly wiped out by the powerful medicinal effects. About 2 more months. He looked at the bowing Zhao Jiao and asked. Ever since he had been severely injured in the battle with Zheng Xiu, he had not taken a single step out of this palace. Whether it was his mood or his attitude towards others, it had unknowingly changed. But towards Zhao Jiao, his eyes were filled with true gentleness. It will take at least 100 days. Before that, you can't violently agitate your inner qi. Otherwise, I'm afraid all your previous efforts will be wasted, Zhao Jiao said respectfully. Yuanwu made a sound of acknowledgement. Zhao Jiao did not look up at his expression, so he did not know what Yuanwu's words meant. The bowl was returned to Zhao Jiao. There was about 10 to 20% of the medicine left inside. As usual, Zhao Jiao silently drank the rest of the medicine in one gulp. The powerful medicinal effect caused Zhao Gao's blood and qi to circulate wildly in his body. His face instantly turned red, and he couldn't help but cough in pain. According to the previous rules, he had to leave. I heard that you had a conflict with Internal Affairs Bureau Liang Pek in the Imperial Palace today? But today, Yuan Wu suddenly asked. Zhao Jiao didn't say much and just nodded in agreement. Yuan Wu did not say much and said coolly, I have decreed to kill him. Zhao Jiao paused slightly and seemed to hesitate. But he still said, I entered the palace to save Imperial Prince Hu Hai. I am close to Hu Hai, but Imperial Prince Fu Su is dissatisfied with me these days. Yuan Wu's brow furrowed slightly. His expression was still faint, but some inexplicable flames appeared in his eyes. You only care about yourself, how can he care? Thank you for your grace. Zhao Jiao gave his thanks and left. When he rode the carriage out of the Imperial Palace below Li Mountain and reached the gates, he couldn't help but shake his head in the carriage, a slightly disdainful expression appearing on his face. Even the strongest person had a weakness. Yuan Wu was like this right now. From a certain point of view, he was the person Yuan Wu trusted the most right now. Or rather, after he could not summon Bai Qi by throwing out enormous benefits, and even Shu Fu had left his side, Yuan Wu needed someone he felt he could trust. In this world, even the loneliest man was afraid of loneliness. Some things, you could not treasure, and did not care, but you had to have them. Today, in the Imperial Palace, that high official of the Internal Affairs Bureau and Zhao Jiao had only had a small conflict. But when Yuan Wu's decree came, when that high official was killed, Zhao Gao's power would reach a new height. In reality, when even the channels to pass on military intelligence were not safe, Yuan Wu, whose personality had changed greatly, could not trust any cultivator. He felt that an ordinary person who was not a cultivator was more trustworthy. In the future, in the Changling Imperial Palace, no one is above you. The carriage driver's voice passed into the carriage. This was Shen Xian's voice. Shen Xian was the driver of this carriage right now. But some people are not satisfied, so they will use the most direct method to kill you. Because you are not a cultivator, you are easy to kill. It is best to attack first. I have already arranged for you, Shen Xian said slowly. Shen Xian slowly continued, but we cannot be on guard for everything. So tomorrow, when the court is discussing politics, you must do something so that those people will not dare to move. Zhao Jiao nodded. He felt these matters were very simple. When a person had supreme power, many things that were as difficult as ascending to the heavens in the eyes of ordinary people would become too simple. Yuan Wu was waiting in his bedroom for his cultivation to recover. But he had not expected that in the eyes of many people, this world did not leave him much time. He also had not expected that many people he was familiar with were very close to him. Li Mountain, on the slope facing the Imperial Palace. The wild grass on the slopes where Jing Liuli grazed the sheep had grown wildly again. The sheep had gone somewhere, but the simple hut she and Dugu Bai had lived in was still there. A bonfire was lit in front of the ruined hut again. Wood casually taken from the roof of the hut was piled up into a fire. A copper pot hung above, and there was wild vegetable soup inside. The person who started the fire to make the soup was Zhao Sai. Standing next to her were Ding Ning and Zhongsun Qianxue. A short while later, there was bell-like laughter. Bai Shanshui and Zhao Yunrui had arrived. Yi Xileng's figure quickly appeared, and then there were many people from Minute Mountain Sword Sect, including Bailey Sushue who had not recovered from his wounds. How long until Yuan Wu? Bai Shanshui looked at the group of palaces that might be the most beautiful in history and asked. At most a month, Qing Yaoyin answered simply. Have you seen anything? Bai Shanshui turned to ask Ding Ning. She could not help but shake her head. Even you cannot see what kind of arrangements this palace is. What use is there in us coming? What can we see? Chapter 892. Ding Ning laughed. Regarding revenge, I have thought of countless methods and possibilities, but no matter which method or possibility, I had not thought it would become so simple in the end. His smile was bright at the start, but in the end, it was indescribable. Actually, I understand. Maybe I do not need to do anything. Just wait a decade, and let the sheep out here, like those secluded cultivators, hunting and fishing in the mountains. Maybe Yuanwu and Zheng Xiu will become like this. Everyone present stilled. A moment of silence. Bai Shanshui thought seriously and grimaced. He said, maybe there really is such a possibility. The other people thought the same. Back then, Wang Jingmeng and Basin Kendo ground had lost because Wang Jingmeng could not see through people's hearts. Many years later, if Yuanwu and Zheng Xiu did not have any enemies that they feared, then their enemies would only be each other. Yuanwu and Zheng Xiu were, in a sense, the same people. They would not tolerate each other forever. I have truly touched the door of Realm 8. Ding Ning looked at Bai Shanshui. He did not speak of the formation of the palace, but suddenly said softly. These words were like thunder to these true martial grandmasters of the present age. As their emotions surged, countless strange roars sounded on the slope. All kinds of lights flashed in the sky, and the clouds danced. How can it be so fast? Yi Xileng was so happy his hands trembled slightly, but he still felt disbelief. Even though Ding Ning had cultivation experience that no one present had, and had once been the existence closest to Realm 8, from the floating island of Jiaodong Commandery to now, the time was too short. There is no name. Ding Ning put away his smile and looked coolly at Yi Xileng. Just like when he had taught her many years ago, he said slowly, searching all the records, there is basically no description of the method to break through from Realm 7 to Realm 8. One is because there are very few Realm 7 Grandmasters, and those who can cultivate from Realm 7 to Realm 8, even in a generation of cultivators, are rare. The other, more important point is the breakthrough from Realm 7 to Realm 8. It's really hard to describe. As he slowly narrated, there seemed to be a strange aura circulating in the air. There seemed to be a magical glow rotating in the air. However, when one really held their breath to sense it, there seemed to be nothing. It was all an illusion. All the Grandmasters present turned solemn. Bai Shanshui sighed softly. She began to understand why Ding Ning insisted that they come today. In fact, it was more important to share this moment and let them experience this process. From Realm 6 to Realm 7, to a large extent, it isn't because one's true essence has reached a certain level, but because of one's mental state. A sudden epiphany and sudden enlightenment is already difficult to describe with words. Ding Ning looked up past the palace in front of him and towards the distant Changling. He said softly, in the past, in Changling, I felt I was infinitely close to Realm 8, and even felt I could use some methods to move Realm 8. After meeting the Donghu holy monk again, I thought even more clearly. The key to reaching Realm 8 is not to take in the world, but release. Bai Shanshui nodded and indicated that he could continue. If one does not solidify one's body, there can be no creation without destruction. When one destroys all cultivation, one's mind and body can be emptied, and a new world can be drawn in. But if one truly empties one's mind, one's cultivation will dissipate. So I think that if one condenses all their vital energy and mind into one point in the body, that is the key to reaching Realm 8. Ding Ning looked calmly at the unfamiliar Changling because of the city walls. He said, in the past, I also said this to the Donghu holy monk. Later, he really reached Realm 8. I thought this was the true great path. But now, I know I was wrong in some places. Zheng Xiu and Yuanwu's duel was her last wish. When she and Yuanwu fought to the death, and Yuanwu was seriously injured, when the news reached my hands, I suddenly felt that everything was empty. Ding Ning turned to look at everyone. Just like many things in the past that disappeared in an instant. Just like what you originally planned, an unusually difficult matter, suddenly became very simple, and no difficulty existed. When everything became so simple, and one's mind was empty, I truly touched the threshold of Realm 8, and sensed the surge of primal energies of the universe that Realm 7s could not touch. Later, I thought through Realm 8, and how the Donghu holy monk reached his realm. Ding Ning smiled emotionally. He only touched Realm 8 after meeting me. I originally thought that my words had an effect on him, and even he thought so. But now, I know that I am the key to his breakthrough. The deeper one cultivates, the higher one's cultivation is, the more one wants to win, and the more one wants to defeat stronger enemies. After the Donghu holy monk saw me, he thought that he could not surpass me in this life, and only wanted to follow me, hoping to see a higher realm appear from me. It was my reappearance that caused him to throw away all of this, and become nothing. So Yuanwu's breakthrough may be because of me. He wanted to kill me all his life, and then he really killed Wang Jingmeng, and obtained Zheng Xiu. All his wishes were fulfilled. I think that when he did it back then, his mind was empty, and he had no place to place it. After Ding Ning finished speaking, the slope was silent for a long time. It's really boring. Bai Shanshui could not help but shake his head, and said with slight disdain, when one first cultivates, one fights with people and the heavens. When one cultivates, one goes up the mountain to kill beasts, and down the sea to kill serpents. One feels that one can do anything with one's sword, and wants to fight with the heroes of the world. But in the end, because one feels that everything is empty, and victory is meaningless, one can reach Realm 8. You have to find the deepest obsession, and then when this obsession suddenly disappears, it will all be gone. Yi Xileng was not as casual as Bai Shanshui, and asked more seriously. So it is interesting to think clearly. Ding Ning said with slight disdain. So after killing Wang Jingmeng, Yuanwu did not care about the people of the world. Even at the Deer Mountain Conference, he was just low-key and did not think much of others. In his view, the marquises of the Qin dynasty were nothing, and Zheng Xiu was not a match for him. So when he dealt with many matters, his attitude was like this. Naturally, Zheng Xiu could not tolerate it. So it is so. If you did not appear, and we did not have the possibility of reaching Realm 8, Zheng Xiu's resistance, in his view, was just a game to pass time. This was something that the proud Zheng Xiu could not accept. Zhao Sai shook his head. But waiting is not as satisfying as taking revenge with one's own hands. Right now, I have not felt the chance to reach Realm 8. I think that it is because Yuanwu has not died. Bai Shanshui stilled, and suddenly felt that Zhao Sai's words were reasonable. He could not help but laugh. You always say that we have become spectators, and it is boring. But the important matter is not over yet. Maybe when Yuanwu dies, we will touch the threshold to Realm 8 at the same time. It is not impossible. Ding Ning laughed. His gaze landed on Epang Palace at the foot of the mountain. He couldn't tell what kind of decorations this palace had made. But right now, he could use the simplest method. And he could make Yuanwu feel even more uneasy. The moment his gaze landed on the palace where Yuanwu was, a wisp of cloud above the mountain twisted strangely, turning into a faint sword light that fell towards the palace. Chapter 893. This sword light was very wondrous, and very similar to Mo Shouqing's sword essence. The sword light would rise from the clouds, and then lock onto a target as far as the eye could see, and fall down like an invisible wall. Yet Ding Ning's sword light did not carry any energy, and no one present could feel any killing intent. Without killing intent, there was no trace, and he had come first. Moreover, this sword light contained many powers that they had never come into contact with before. Bai Shanshui and the others present grew inexplicably solemn. Epang Palace's reaction was also wondrous. When this faint sword light neared the roof of the palace, a grand sound sounded in the empty palace. Many sharp sounds of wind came from the ground below the palace, and naturally faced the sword light. The wind was formless, but it was as sharp as real metal blades. In everyone's perception, the wind formed 8 huge golden men. They stretched out their hands and grabbed the sword light. In the next moment, there was no great collision or explosion. The faint but exceptionally powerful sword light then disappeared, dispersing in the palace along with the sound of the wind. Earth Fiend formation. Ding Ning frowned slightly and said softly, "What do you mean?" Bai Shanshui was puzzled. "Do you still remember the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde?" Ding Ning turned to look at her and said, "You entered Changling for the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde." In reality, the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde and the Earth Fiend formation of Epang Palace are the same. They use earth veins to create formations. The difference is that the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde uses the power of the earth veins. Once it is used, the surface is destroyed. The formation here most likely will silently destroy the primal energies of the universe in the earth veins below. So this is a turtle shell. Bai Shanshui understood and smiled scornfully. It should be the primal energies of the universe gathered by cultivators that will dissipate inside. Yi Xileng looked at Ding Ning and asked seriously. Ding Ning nodded. That is also a turtle shell, Bai Shanshui said scornfully. In any case, he does not dare to come out. The clouds in the sky calmed down. This turtle shell suits him very well. Zhao Sai looked at the palace and could not help but shake his head. He said softly, in any case, he has always liked to hide behind the scenes and have people fight to the death in front of him. He has benefited from all the good things, but he wants people to bear the infamy. How can there be such a good thing in the world? Yangtai Guanjian also looked at the palaces without speaking. Karma seemed to be a very ethereal thing. But from the grievances of Changling many years ago until now, everything seemed to prove that this existed. Epang Palace was very peaceful. It was as if the faint sword light had never appeared. But in Yuanwu's perception in the Black Palace, that sword light was extremely clear. The energy vibrations in the sky had completely disappeared, but the air in the Black Palace was as thick as seawater, and surged with each of Yuanwu's heavy breaths. Yuanwu's eyes were filled with unspeakable viciousness, as well as disbelief and terror that could not be concealed. Why is he so fast? He knew very well that Wang Jingmeng had been stuck at Realm 7 and 8 a decade ago in Changling. But from Realm 7 to this Realm 8 sword, the other was still too fast, so fast that it surpassed his imagination. In his thinking, even if Ding Ning only needed a few years to truly enter Realm 8, and even surpass his cultivation at the Deer Mountain Conference, he still had time to breathe, and find some chances to win during this time. In this moment, many people's faces flashed through his mind. Mo Shouqing, Yi Xinhe, Xu Fu, and so many marquises of the Qin dynasty. But these people were no longer here. Only Huang Jinwei, who he had turned into an inanimate puppet, remained by his side. The last thing that appeared clearly in his mind was Zheng Xiu's face. Accompanied by bone-chilling coldness, this existence who had been recognized as the strongest cultivator and emperor in the world for the past decade started to feel endless regret. All of this seemed to have originated from Zheng Xiu. As he and Zheng Xiu moved further and further away, everything seemed to be out of control. Suddenly, his body started to tremble violently. An indescribable pain filled his body and mind. He started to feel that his earliest hatred towards Wang Jingmeng came from his jealousy of Wang Jingmeng. He was jealous of Wang Jingmeng's cultivation and power, and even more jealous that Zheng Xiu, who seemed to carry all the glory in the world, had become Wang Jingmeng's woman. But hadn't he won in the end? Hadn't he caused Wang Jingmeng to die in Changling like a moth to a flame, and then he successfully took the throne, and made Zheng Xiu the empress? Shouldn't he cherish something he had fought for and risked the world's infamy? Why had it become like this in the end? No one could answer his question. There wasn't a second living person in the area of several thousand feet around this black sleeping palace. He was a true loner. Changling, falling parasol. A carriage slowly stopped at the entrance to the alley. This carriage was very ordinary, but for some inexplicable reason, it seemed to have a unique presence that attracted the attention of a cultivator from the military prison. When Yi Xileng and Chief Inspector Chen left Changling one after another, the Astrology Bureau and Divinity Bureau had disappeared. The ones who took over the former duties of the Astrology Bureau and Divinity Bureau became the Military Bureau of the Warden's Office. But when Huang Jinwei disappeared from Changling, and even the Corner Tower Guard Army only existed in name, the officials of the Military Bureau could not do as the Astrology Bureau and Divinity Bureau had done in the past. When he clearly saw the two people who walked down from the carriage, this military prison official subconsciously rubbed his eyes, thinking that he was seeing things. However, in the next moment, his entire body instantly went rigid, the flying sword in his sleeve suddenly starting to vibrate. Do not move. I do not want to kill people. I did not come to kill people. Ding Ning looked calmly at this young official and shook his head. Think of your family. This official did not move. His clothing was gradually soaked in cold sweat. There was only one thought in his mind. How can he appear so openly in Changling? You have to understand. Many years ago, the ones guarding Changling were not you, but us. Ding Ning looked at this young official and saw what he was thinking. For you, Changling is a home you can use your life to protect, but for us, it is even more so. So do not think that Changling is yours, or Yuanwu's. I just came to meet some people and discuss some matters, not to kill. Ding Ning looked at this young official whose body was no longer stiff. He repeated and then added softly, but since you have seen me, help me pass on the sword leader token. Starting today, Yuanwu can challenge me at any time, as long as it is a duel under fair conditions. The young official's body shook violently, and his mind went blank. Before he could react, an ice-cold sword had already landed in his palm. Chapter 894. When this young official walked out of Falling Parasol with the first sword token that everyone in the world knew about, he felt numb all over. But what he thought about the most was not the present Ding Ning, Wang Jingmeng's cultivation in the past, and his goal in returning to Changling, but the words Ding Ning had said to him. He stopped walking and looked at the Changling that now had walls. The enormous shadow of the walls covered the houses near the walls like a black cloud. For some reason, compared to the open Changling without walls in the past, he suddenly felt uncomfortable and not used to it. Behind closed doors, who owned Changling? In the minds of the people of the Basin Kendo ground back then, Changling did not belong to one person alone, but all of Changling. This young official seemed to understand. He grimaced slightly, gripped the first sword token in his hand, and strode towards the warden's office residence. This young official did not conceal anything about Ding Ning's appearance, and even explained everything he said when he met Ding Ning. The young official was very relieved to hear this. In his view, Ding Ning's safety had nothing to do with him. Yet, he did not notice the expressions of the high-ranking officials present. These high-ranking officials did not react strongly. The thoughts of the highest-ranking vice bureau chief were not even on the first sword token in front of him. It was impossible for this young official to know that this noble, whose status was much higher than his, was currently thinking about the imperial palace at the foot of Mount Li. This vice bureau chief was thinking about whether the first sword token and the news of Ding Ning's grand return to Changling could reach the Yuanwu emperor in the imperial palace. Ever since the battle between the Yuanwu emperor and Empress Zheng Xiu, none of them had been able to see Yuanwu. Yet, the carriage carrying Zhao Jiao had traveled back and forth between Changling and the imperial palace more frequently. In this period of time, the Yuanwu emperor had shown absolute trust in Zhao Jiao more than once. Many of Yuanwu's former shadow guards had even started to protect Zhao Gao's safety. If the imperial sons of the imperial palace could express different opinions, these officials would have the power to fight. But Fu Su had been imprisoned in the imperial palace and could not participate in politics. As to Hu Hai, he relied on Zhao Jiao more than Yuanwu. Can the medicine be stronger, and take effect faster? In the Black Palace, the Yuanwu emperor looked down and asked Zhao Jiao. Zhao Jiao said, "I will try. But if the medicine is stronger, I fear that many officials in court will object." The Yuanwu emperor's voice turned cold. No one dares to object. Zhao Jiao nodded, bowed and left. The carriage carrying Zhao Jiao left palace and returned to Changling. When the Internal Affairs Division began to prepare the ingredients for the new pill formula, dozens of officials arrived in front of Hu Hai's palace. Zhao Jiao and Hu Hai were talking in the study. When these officials came to the door of the study, Zhao Jiao and Hu Hai were still sitting facing each other. They were talking about something interesting. Hu Hai had a smile, but when he saw these officials, his expression was impatient. The oldest official came forward and expressed strong opposition. He felt that many of the medicines in the pill recipe would have a detrimental effect on Yuanwu in the future. Zhao Jiao listened quietly. He did not express any opinion, and did not stand up. He just pointed at the garden outside the study. In the garden, there was a deer villa. In the deer villa, there were 2 seeker deer. Zhao Jiao looked at the old official and all the officials behind him. He pointed coolly at one of the deer and said, "What is that?" The old official stilled. "Of course it is a deer." Zhao Jiao smiled coldly and said, "It is clearly a horse." The old official and all the officials behind him were stunned and could not react. Zhao Jiao turned back and did not look at these officials. "If I say it is a horse, As to your opinion, is it important? The old official's lips trembled for a long time. He could not speak and then vomited blood. When these officials realized some things and left, the news of Ding Ning issuing the first Sword of the World token to challenge Yuanwu spread like a gust of wind from Changling to the world. Ever since the battle between Zheng Xiu and Yuanwu, the seemingly dull streets of Changling became lively again. Everyone knew that Yuanwu was seriously wounded. But today, Ding Ning had said that they could choose any absolutely fair way to fight. Even many people who didn't know how to cultivate could think of many ways to make the duel very fair. Everyone looked forward to the battle between Yuanwu and Ding Ning. Especially when most people in Changling had seen the battle when Wang Jingmeng had fought his way into Changling more than a decade ago. Now that Yuanwu had reached Realm 8, and Ding Ning could propose an absolutely fair fight, everyone started to feel that Yuanwu lacked a fair fight with Ding Ning. Just like how the grievances between Yuanwu and Zheng Xiu had been resolved in a battle. In the past, the grievances between the Basin Kendo Ground and Yuanwu had been resolved in a battle like this. Especially when the news of Bai Qi's repeated attacks on the Qin and Qi battlefields came, all the Qin people started to feel that the major matters of the world could be resolved in this battle. Then what was Yuanwu waiting for? It was just like watching a play, watching a popular actress who was waiting to appear for a long time. Everyone grew more and more expectant and impatient. This Yuanwu is really a good-for-nothing. As time passed, one day in a tavern in Changling, a customer who had drunk too much could not help but curse Yuanwu. Publicly insulting the Holy One in Changling was something unimaginable in the past. But this curse seemed to be a spark that lit up the dry grass. In just a few days, more voices insulted Yuanwu in the streets of Changling. It rained again in Changling. The rain was very heavy. In the pouring rain, Zhao Gao's carriage left the imperial palace. But this time, there was no warm medicinal soup in Zhao Gao's carriage. Zhao Gao's carriage slowly disappeared in the rain, and disappeared on the path from Changling to Epang Palace. It was also in this heavy rain. A young woman holding an umbrella appeared on the slope of Li Mountain where she had grazed the sheep. This young woman looked at the completely destroyed hut, her eyes filled with complicated emotions. She put down the umbrella, and started to tidy the hut in the rain. It took her a long time to finally restore the collapsed and dilapidated hut to its original state. She curled up on the bed in the hut in satisfaction. Her energy surged and drove away the moisture in the hut. But she still lacked bowls and chopsticks, and things to cook. She was slightly dazed, and could not help but sigh. Chapter 895. She was Jing Liuli. When she had returned from the Chulands to this mountain slope where she and Dugu Bai had once herded sheep, she had grown taller, her features more mature and determined, and less immature. She looked at the curtain of rain outside the hut, and the water droplets seeping down from the roof. She suddenly had a strange feeling. She did not understand if she had done such a thing purely out of her own preferences, or if she had been affected by other people's emotions. She realized that her previous life could be divided into 3 segments. One was learning the sword in Minute Mountain Sword Sect, purely to cultivate vital energy methods and sword skills. One was following Ding Ning in Changling. Another was herding sheep here, waiting for a chance to kill Minister Li. It seemed that starting from herding sheep here, her life was completely in her control. Then, this 3rd segment should be the most important to her. If she did not have the company of a kind youth like Dugu Bai, would she have reached this step? Would she have been like Yi Xinhe and the others at the Basin Kendo Ground back then, and have other choices? This was related to her subconscious state of mind. She could not guess and speculate. If one's heart did not have a place to rest, one would feel that this hut was empty. Her emotions and related thoughts did not last long. Any wise person, not limited to cultivators, would not be like so many infatuated men and women, wallowing in their own world with self-pity and self-love. Instead, they would know how to let go of the knot in their heart and search for the meaning of their existence in this world, as well as the things that made them happy in this world. But at this time, she was suddenly shocked. She suddenly sensed the remaining presence of someone on this mountain slope. She immediately sensed how powerful that blow was. She quickly understood who this sword essence belonged to. So he had come here before. So he had reached such a level. She suddenly laughed inexplicably. Because from this sword essence, from the presence that was faintly discernible in the rain, she suddenly understood many of the cultivation problems that troubled her. She would obtain many benefits from these presences. So she immediately understood that Ding Ning had done it deliberately so that these presences would still exist even now. So Ding Ning knew that after she returned to Changling, she would come here immediately. He had left behind such presences for her to sense because he was still teaching her. At least, this could help her improve faster. This kind of unselfish teaching made her understand that Ding Ning had no enmity towards her. At this time, the rain that was flowing down rhythmically and silently from the hut suddenly became restless. This was because of the change in her presence. She frowned slightly and looked down the mountain slope. An umbrella slowly floated over from the grass below. The umbrella covered more than half of the umbrella holder's body, but she still recognized this person at a glance. She stilled. Dugu Bai slowly released his true essence and supported his body, allowing his feet to walk on the wet grass. He came uneasily to the hut, put away the umbrella, and cautiously entered the hut. He nodded at Jing Liuli in greeting but did not say anything. Then he paused slightly, took down the things from the bag he was carrying, and started to prepare dinner. Jing Liuli looked at him busy and did not immediately speak. When she was angry, when the rain was filled with warmth, and the hut was filled with light, she spoke quietly. "Ding Ning, had you come? He told me, so I came myself." Dugu Bai was no longer nervous and restrained, but felt inexplicably shy. "Even if you wanted to fool Yuanwu and make him believe you, you should have told me afterwards." If this was in the past, Jing Liuli would not have responded to him. Because in her world, there were few IFS. Without IFS, there would be no corresponding answers. But today, she was silent for a moment and nodded. "It is my problem." This was like an admission of fault. Dugu Bai was slightly taken aback as he raised his head. He had not expected her to admit her fault like this. In his view, this young woman with the best cultivation talent in Changling had the same appearance, but in the firelight, she had a gentleness she had never had before. She had been weathered and matured greatly. He suddenly felt inexplicably moved. "Before I came, Ding Ning asked me to pass a message to you." He looked into Jing Liuli's eyes. "You do not have to risk your life in front of Yuanwu. I understand what he means. In reality, he wants to tell me that while the matters of the world are often decided by the top people of this era, they will not change because of one person's will. No one person can decide things." Jing Liuli smiled slightly. Yuanwu has reached this step, not just because of the wills of Ding Ning and the people of the Basin Kendo ground, but also Zhang Xiu, the Jiao Sword Furnace, Bai Shanshui, the Donghu monk, even the old woman of the Wuji, Shu Fu, Bai Qi, and the others. It is the wills and thoughts of many people that decided what happened today. She slowly put away her smile and looked at the rain outside. Just like there is an ocean in the distance, formed by countless rains like this, and even formed by countless rains like this from a long time ago. It is good that you understand. Dugu Bai shook his head. "I did not think so much. Where did you come from?" Jing Liuli asked. Dugu Bai said, "I came from Changling." "So he is already in Changling?" Jing Liuli thought. "What is he doing in Changling? He should be finding the remaining marquises to have a talk." Dugu Bai said, "If those marquises still have different thoughts, it will be more troublesome." Jing Liuli nodded. "So I cannot completely decide a major matter, but I can make many things happen faster. For example, I can make Yuanwu have less time to struggle." Dugu Bai could hear that she still wanted to take a risk. He took a deep breath. But before he could speak, Jing Liuli continued. "If Yuanwu has less time to struggle, fewer people will die." Dugu Bai stilled, understood her meaning, and did not speak. He already knew her whereabouts in the past. He knew she had come from the Chu. There, the Qin army had just swept away most of the Chu army, and then Bai Qi had led his army into Qi. Over there, she should have seen more death. She should have seen more soldiers die, not for herself, but purely for the dynasty. Maybe, in her eyes, That was meaningless. But she was really very different from before. She wanted this kind of war to end faster. Dugubai thought for a moment. If he had such ability, he would definitely do the same. So he did not object, and started to seriously cook. Chapter 896. In Changling under the torrential rain, there was a residence. All the doors and windows in this residence were exceptionally large, not because the owner liked to breathe in air, but because the owner of this residence was very large. Marquis Shu's mountainous figure sat in front of a window. His gaze passed through the curtain of rain and looked in the direction of Li Mountain. Ding Ning was sitting at the tea table next to him and slowly drinking tea. I had not thought that everything would come so quickly, just like how I had not thought that the Basin Kendo ground would fall so quickly. Marquis Shu's eyes held an indescribable emotion. Many dynasties had changed in history, but he had never personally experienced them. Also, those dynasties rarely changed so quickly, so his feelings could not be described in words. But Ding Ning could understand his feelings. Since you were all caught off guard, I only want you to make the same choice as back then, and let this matter end faster, Ding Ning said as he calmly drank tea. Marquis Shu slowly turned his enormous body. Even though he was dressed in ordinary cloth robes, it was difficult. You do not hate what happened back then? Ding Ning did not directly answer Marquis Shu's question. He smiled faintly and said, "You should understand one thing. No matter back then or now, I do not want to be emperor, and have no interest in being emperor. Especially back then, I only did it for Changling, for the soldiers of the Qin dynasty who risked their lives with us. If you feel that the ending cannot be changed, and ending faster means fewer people will die, your choice is understandable." Marquis Shu was silent for a long time before he spoke. "I cannot represent all of them." Ding Ning shook his head and said, "You can." Marquis Shu was slightly shocked. Ding Ning looked at him and said, "Because only you do not know that you are the one they have chosen, because in their view, you are the closest to the Basin Kendo ground. So they feel that if you are the middleman to meet me, it will be easier to erase my hatred, and I can better accept you." Marquis Shu bowed his head. His facial muscles twitched slightly. He felt a little ashamed. Over the years, he had never done anything for the Basin Kendo ground. At most, he had secretly expressed some goodwill to those cultivators who sympathized with the Basin Kendo ground and were dissatisfied with Zhengxiu Yuanwu, and solved some of their problems. For example, although he had fought with Yi Xileng once, he had secretly protected Yi Xileng. Was this kindness enough? He lowered his head and looked down a little more. This was a nod. Ding Ning also nodded and turned to look at the rain outside the window. All of this will end soon, and a never-before-seen dynasty will appear. Even if there were more bloody fights for power in the future, when this dynasty was unified, at least no matter if it was Qin, whether it was Han, Zhao, Wei, or the current Chu, Yang, or Qi, the people in these places would soon have no concept of the difference between dynasties. Only the people of the world, not which dynasty you are from. This is the beginning of a brand new era. Goodwill is very important. Ding Ning smiled. Only people who feel that this world is reasonable, and have goodwill towards the matters of this world, can receive the goodwill of this world. The carriage moved in the rain, the pillars of rain hitting the roof with muffled sounds. Galloping military horses passed through the empty streets and alleys. When Ding Ning walked out of the Shu Marquis establishment, the carriage he was in invisibly became a forbidden area of Changling, and no one would care. Just like many years ago when Yuanwu had made his move, the true powers of Changling had silently chosen a side. Compared to the bloody turmoil in Changling, what the nobility had to do this time was much simpler. They only needed to do nothing. They did not need to do anything. Those galloping military horses were mostly carrying low-level officials of the bureaus. These low-level officials had only one goal in rushing out of the city, to search for the missing Zhao Jiao. The world of the truly powerful only cared about the benefits of the whole and following the trend. As to the people at the bottom, the people who truly supported the operation of the enormous dynasty, they needed some beautiful ideas for the future, some hope for a better life. For the vast majority of ordinary people, their choices were based on more direct emotions. Or rather, dreams that were manipulated, emotions that were controlled by lies and thoughts that others instilled in them. It was more troublesome to make these people make decisions. They needed to use some methods to bewitch people. In the past, Yuanwu had been very skilled in such methods. Back then, in order to temporarily quell the strong backlash of the old nobility, and have the Shang family be scapegoats, Yuanwu had used such methods. At a place in the Wei River, the water flowed against the flow, and a golden person charged out. The crimes on the golden person's back were all related to the Shang family. So the Shang family was destroyed, and only an orphan girl remained. This method was clumsy, but astoundingly effective. Many things, after being passed around for a long time and being passed around many times, would seem to be the truth. The carriage carrying Ding Ning headed north of the city. He had to solve the problem of ordinary people's choices, and also the problem of the lonely mountain sword horde. If Changling would become the center of the world in the future, and a great city that would last for a long time, he would not leave behind any power that could easily destroy this city. As the carriage moved forward, his vital energy silently spread through the world. Guided by his vital energy, the streams of water under the wheels seemed to have a life of their own as they gathered into thin bundles. They methodically seeped into the cracks of Changling's stone paths and into the earth veins below. This carriage moved silently north, but Ding Ning in the carriage pulled more and more power. Like a spider weaving an enormous web, he continued to weave. The threads pulled more and more parts of the city. Slowly, he seemed to be pulling half of the city as he walked. Some of the primordial powers of the world deep in the ground started to move. Those powers that had been balanced could cause an unimaginable outpouring of power if they were broken. Yet those powers were suppressed by the enormous web that Ding Ning was pulling. The records of the Lonely Mountain Sword Horde were a method to activate this kind of power. Now, this destructive power was only slowly being released. The ground of Changling started to slowly shake. All the buildings on the ground started to sway slightly. All the tables, chairs, and beds in the houses started to sway. The pots and bowls in the windows started to collide with each other, giving off frightening sounds. While the rain did not stop, everyone started to leave their rooms and felt terror. Chapter 897. Many people looked at the shaking buildings and started to cry. Not out of terror, but out of heartache. If it collapsed, how much money would it take to rebuild? Especially those people who had just rested in their houses, they cursed the heavens in anger and frustration. But the heavens seemed to give an even stronger response to their curses. Even ordinary people who had never cultivated could sense a destructive power that seemed to want to break free of its cage. The crying and cursing stopped. The people drenched in the rain started to flee into the air of the city. This was a natural instinct to avoid being injured by the bricks, stones, and wooden beams of the collapsed buildings. Also, many of the giant turrets in Changling were shaking uneasily in the rain and mist. What does he want to do? Mount Heng Marquis Shu's enormous body had landed on the roof of the tallest building in his residence. He looked towards the north of the city. While he could not sense Ding Ning's exact location, the violently shaking roof under his feet and the extremely dangerous presence caused him to be certain that it was Ding Ning who had started all of this. Many of the nobles who were standing high up in the rain like him had the same puzzlement. Changling's present scale could not be separated from the blood of the swordsman on the Basin Kendo ground. Since Ding Ning thought this city was so important, and even carried many of his happy and unhappy memories, then he could not destroy it with his own hands. Then what did he want to do? Ding Ning quickly gave everyone an answer. Collapsing sounds started to sound. The people standing in the open were dominated by despair and heartache. They could not stop themselves from crying. But then they found to their shock that the collapsing sounds were not coming from the city, but from the walls surrounding the city. The rain lessened. The rain clouds that shrouded the majestic city were dispersed by a kind of released power. Everyone looked towards the enormous city walls that had become clear due to the absence of the curtain of rain. They saw to their shock that the entire city walls started to collapse. Huge rocks began to crack and roll down from the city wall. In the span of a few breaths, the city walls started to collapse. Even in this humid weather, The collapsing city walls were shrouded in dragon-like dust. The city walls collapsed, but all the buildings in the city were unharmed. However, the shocking events did not stop there. In a certain empty field where most people were gathered in Changling, the people gathered here found the ground shaking even more violently. The ground began to crack. People ran away in panic. However, the destructive aura began to disappear, and the tremors in the city began to subside. Soon, the entire city calmed down. The people looked at the intact houses and the disappeared city walls. They were still in shock, but there was an indescribable joy. Suddenly, someone cried out in alarm. That was because someone from a high vantage point had clearly seen the crack in the ground of the drill ground. There was a huge crack in the ground, and the rainwater accumulated on the ground fell into the depths of the ground along the edge of the crack, like a waterfall. Looking down from above, these crisscrossing cracks formed the words, "Yuanwu is dead, the world prospers." Exclamations continued to ring out. More and more people went to higher places and saw these words. It must be the Basin Kendo ground. Someone shouted angrily. Basin Kendo ground? Did you see any sword master draw his sword? This place, and the city walls as well? Who can cut down all the city walls in front of everyone, and cause the world to change to form words like this, and not destroy our houses? Are you a cultivator? Do you feel you can do it? This is a sign of the heavens, this is the decree of the heavens. This kind of person betrays his trust, and even kills his wife. Even the heavens cannot stand it. The soldiers on the battlefield can't even provide necessities, and they even built such useless walls. What about now? Yet, those angry voices were quickly drowned out by even more angry voices. No one had expected so many such voices to erupt without any restraints. Many young Changling officials were mixed in the crowd. Many of them were still loyal to Yuanwu, but when they heard such voices, their bodies grew colder, and they did not remember the faces of the people who were cursing angrily. Because everyone seemed to be talking and cursing Yuanwu. At a time like this, they appeared too insignificant. In the Changling Imperial Palace, in front of a hall, under the cover of several canopies, Hu Hai, who had escaped the palace, hugged several palace attendants and trembled. Even deep in the Imperial Palace, he could faintly hear the angry voices coming from all parts of the city. Like a frightened rabbit, he buried his head in the clothes of these palace attendants. Yet, at this time, he did not feel that Yuanwu was his saving grace. He kept muttering to himself in terror, describing why Zhao Jiao had disappeared, and why he was not by his side to protect him. The entire city had become a sea of emotions and anger. Ding Ning's carriage moved through this sea. He started to truly rest. The mood of such a city brought him back to many years ago. Only before the Qin dynasty had truly fought against the Han, Zhao, and Wei, especially before the battle with Zhao Yi, did this city have such emotions. Because before the rise of the Basin Kendo ground, the Qin dynasty's army had fought against the Zhao within their own borders. They had suffered a great defeat and lost more than 100,000 people. After the rise of the Basin Kendo ground, when the Qin dynasty's army started to fight back against the Zhao with such emotions, the one who had been restless at the time had been the king of Zhao. But now, the imperial palace of Li Mountain shook for a moment because of the earthquake in Changling. When the walls of Changling collapsed, the imperial palace of Li Mountain had completely recovered its calm. But in the Black Palace, Yuanwu's entire body was trembling. Not because of terror or shock, but because before the earthquake, he could not control the trembling of his flesh and blood. This was a natural reaction of the body after an uncontrollable desire was not satisfied. He desired Zhao Gao's medicine, but he knew now that even if he could find Zhao Jiao, he could not obtain this medicine. He called himself this lonely one because he was very proud. He thought that he had the strongest will in the world, and that his mind would not be shaken. But now, his dependence on this medicine was starting to destroy his will. As he trembled, he was dazed for a moment. It seemed that what was devouring his vital energy and will was not just the star energy that Zheng Xiu had left him, but also Ding Ning's vital energy, and countless little silkworms biting at him. In the air where his body shook, the ghosts of his past enemies seemed to appear. They danced around him, mocking and whispering by his ear. "How long can you hide?" Chapter 898. Why had it become like this? In the past many years, he had been the strongest emperor in the world, the one with the greatest power. But now, other than hiding, he could not even escape. Letting go of everything to escape required courage, and even more cultivation and power. Along with the weakening of his body and will, his power was also rapidly deteriorating. Even in this black palace, even though there were indiscernible murmurs by his ears, making him unable to sleep, unable to think calmly, and dazed, he knew very well that if he did not have the power to surpass most realm 7 grandmasters in the world, he could not escape the pursuit of the Basin Kendo ground, much less become someone like Bai Shanshui. Letters of military intelligence and admonition were still delivered to his sleeping palace with the passing of day and night. As time passed, these documents changed from begging for his orders to simply telling him things that were already happening, or coldly stating some facts, and urging him to make a decision. The Yang dynasty had officially died. The Qin army led by Bai Qi had officially taken over the Qi capital. All the marquises of the Qin dynasty who had been preparing to attack Bai Qi had turned to silence. The large ships of Jiaodong Commandery had unobstructed and resumed trade with Changling. On the tables of ordinary people in Changling, in the markets, fresh and cheap sea fish appeared again. All the people felt that the source of the problem was him. They were all waiting and urging him to personally resolve the grievances from many years ago. He could even clearly sense the change in these people's thoughts. He knew that most people hoped that he would be killed by Ding Ning and end all of this. As time went by, his hiding caused more and more people to have such thoughts. More and more people felt that he was cowardly, shameless, and then felt that he had been despicable many years ago. This was undoubtedly a humiliation he had never thought would fall on him. In the end, he became numb to even this humiliation. All the unbearable physical and mental feelings, in the end, only a strong desire was left, waiting for a person to appear. Jing Liuli. Why had Jing Liuli not come yet? Another night. Many dogs suddenly barked in the streets of Changling. All the dogs barked uneasily and fearfully, as if they had seen something terrible. However, all the people who were awakened by the barking of dogs rubbed their eyes and walked out of their homes to check, but found nothing. In the imperial palace of Mount Li Yuanwu, who had his head lowered and was either asleep or not, raised his head. A terrifying red light shot out from his bloodshot eyes, and a beast-like growl came from his throat. The person he had been waiting for had arrived. A woman dressed in green appeared in his perception as if she had fallen from the moonlight. Yuanwu shouted harshly. The startled Li Mountain Imperial Palace quickly became deathly silent again. In the darkness, the gaze that stared at the small voice that landed in front of Yuanwu's sleeping palace was also filled with unease and terror. The door to the bedroom opened. An unpleasant medicinal energy rushed towards Jing Liuli along with the black wind. At the same time, Yuanwu's voice sounded like it came from another world. "This lonely one has waited for you for a long time." This voice was still authoritative, and seemed to pierce Jing Liuli's ears like thousands of needles. But Jing Liuli frowned slightly and did not react. She just calmly walked into the black bedroom. A powerful force slowly and orderly pushed out from her body, pushing away the unpleasant smell that pervaded the hall. In the depths of the bedroom, Yuanwu, who was sitting straight like a spear, suddenly found something inconceivable. He shouted softly, "Your cultivation has reached such a level." Hearing Yuanwu's words, Jing Liuli laughed. "The higher my cultivation, the happier you should be." Yuanwu could not immediately answer. From Jing Liuli's smile, he saw many unexpected information. Ruthlessness and doubt naturally surged in the depths of his eyes. The flesh on his back trembled and twitched again because of the instability of the true essence in his body. "One Huang Jinwei is not enough for you. If you want to kill Ding Ning, you need a puppet stronger than Huang Jinwei, such as me." Jing Liuli looked calmly and coldly at Yuanwu and said, "Pity that you do not have Zheng Xiu. Your intentions are too easy to understand. If Zheng Xiu is a schemer who can play with people's hearts, then you are at most a child in Changling playing house." Yuanwu's body started to give off coldness. His pupils contracted violently, The uncontrollable violence, disappointment, and anger caused him to become hysterical. He laughed harshly. The sharp sound was like a tangible hand slapping the walls of the hall and creating a loud echo. You are very smart. It is very difficult to use you, but you are too proud. You still came. You think that I have waited for you just for this possibility. Jing Liuli looked coolly at him. What other possibilities are there that I have not thought of? For example, I do not have to turn you into a puppet that I can control at will. For example, I can borrow large amounts of fresh and pure vital energy from your body to help me completely disperse the energy imprint that slut left behind. After all, I can sense that you are still practicing the cultivation methods I told you. Your quintessential essence is still changing in the direction I want it to go. Thinking of what would happen next, Yuanwu's body trembled in excitement. Every muscle on his face seemed to be twitching. For example, there is the Black Cloak Formation in Epang Palace. This formation comes from the former Lone Mountain, and is completely different from the formations of the present sects. In a formation like this, I can use my power as I wish, but other cultivators cannot. He and Jing Liuli were very similar in some ways. When something was fated to happen, they would not conceal it, and would not waste time. When his voice rang out in this bedroom, a black storm instantly surged up from the ground. Within the black storm, streaks of golden light surged. The golden light was like a wondrous liquid that flowed and gathered at a speed that surpassed the perception of a Realm 7 cultivator. 8 golden figures appeared around Jing Liuli. The power that these 8 enormous golden figures gave off was connected with the earth. They suppressed all of Jing Liuli's movements, including the flow of vital energy in her body. A terrifying sound came from Yuanwu's throat. His eyes were filled with endless greed, like 2 terrifying black holes. Following his thoughts, the vital energy of the immobile Jing Liuli was strangely squeezed out. It flowed along the black energy in the air, and entered Yuanwu's body as he breathed. Jing Liuli's vital energy was rapidly being pulled out by Yuanwu, and entered his energy sea. When one could not control their vital energy, this cultivator was no different from an inanimate object, and could not resist at all. But inexplicably, Jing Liuli's eyes did not show any terror, and instead burned with a layer of disdain. Chapter 899. The disdain came from confidence, from the present situation. Jing Liuli was certain that this strongest emperor was at an unprecedented level of weakness. This weakness was not just in the fall of cultivation, but also in the mind. Yuanwu's mind was riddled with holes by all kinds of negative emotions. Right now, he was not just a gambler who had lost completely. Adding on his addiction to drugs, he was more like a gambler and a drug addict. Just like how he had trusted Zhao Jiao so much that Zhao Jiao easily took control of the highest power in Changling, and easily took everything in Changling from Yuanwu's hands to complete the transfer of the Basin Kendo ground. In Jing Liuli's eyes, the present Yuanwu was no different from the Chu and Qi emperors at the end of their road, crazy, idiotic, and irrational. Jing Liuli's vital energy was very pure and powerful. Yuanwu had been dealing with his wounds in recent days, and with Zhang Xiu's ghost. It had been a long time since he felt such surging vital energy flowing freely through his body. He almost moaned in pleasure. But at this time, he did not see the terror in Jing Liuli's eyes, but saw great disdain and undisguised disdain. In his view, as long as Jing Liuli appeared in front of him in this hall, he was a bloodthirsty beast, and Jing Liuli was just a sheep being torn apart by bloody claws and teeth. But now, the sheep was looking at the giant beast with such a gaze. Even though he had lost his mind, he immediately felt an ominous feeling. Shock and puzzlement appeared in his eyes. As he felt more and more true essence nourishing the meridians in his body that were like dried up land, he felt his physical condition becoming better and better. It was like a withered old tree that had finally received dew and was beginning to have vitality. The feeling of astonishment in his heart became even stronger. The Goldman formation that only he could control, and could even stop a realm-mate's power. Adding on that the other's vital energy was being absorbed by him at a terrifying speed, his own power was rapidly growing stronger, and the other's power was rapidly weakening. How could there be a chance to turn the situation around? Actually, without Zhang Xiu, You really are nothing. Just like back then, without Zheng Xiu, you wouldn't have been able to kill the Basin Kendo ground. Cracking sounds came from Jing Liuli's body. Because the vital energy had surged out too violently, her body even bent slightly. The bones in her body cracked due to the uncontrollable pressure. But looking at Yuanwu across from her, an even more disdainful sneer appeared on her pale face. You have probably forgotten how I killed Minister Li at this moment. Yuanwu was stunned. He subconsciously thought about this question seriously and quickly. This wasn't really a problem. Because the death of Li Sai, one of the two prime ministers of the Qin dynasty, was no secret, Jing Liuli had deduced that Zheng Xiu had hidden the aura in Li Sai's Qi ocean. That aura was originally a signal for help. Thus, Zheng Xiu's power followed the signal and descended. She had not expected the one to send out this signal was Jing Liuli, and the target of her starfire sword was Li Sai. When Yuanwu thought of these matters, his mind suddenly became clearer like starlight flashing past. His body suddenly trembled and stiffened. You underestimate Minute Mountain Sword Sect too much, and my talent. In this world, Zheng Xiu of the Basin Kendo ground is not the only one capturing the energies of the stars. There is also Minute Mountain Sword Sect. Jing Liuli's proud sneer gave the answer. Her laughter echoed in the hall. In Yuanwu's ears, it was like countless ghosts were repeating in every dark corner. Since I can form the same star energy as her in Li Sai's energy ocean, why do you feel that I cannot form the poison she gave you in the end? The poison she spoke of was not a true poison. But Yuanwu knew better than anyone the meaning of her words. That was the star energy that Zheng Xiu had hidden in the spirit lotuses when she had used the spirit springs of Changling to nurture them. In these days, those starfire that had been tormenting him day and night like maggots was the last and most vicious gift Zheng Xiu had left him before she left this world. Boom! A loud sound rang out. A great power surged in Yuanwu's body. The power in his body sensed extreme danger and immediately cut off the connection between Jing Liuli's vital energy and his body. The vital energy in his body recoiled and sent Jing Liuli flying backwards. Under this terrifying blow, Jing Liuli flew backwards like a butterfly with broken wings. Blood sprayed from her mouth and nose. But her gaze as she looked at Yuanwu became extremely cold, and even her disdain disappeared. Is there still time? She said this in her heart. Yuanwu roared and howled. The entire palace shook violently under his roars and howls, and the surging yuan qi seemed to want to lift the roof of the palace up. Yuanwu's face seemed to be embedded with many grains of gold. His skin started to shine with dots of light. The vital energy in his body started to burn. Those sparks that represented Zheng Xiu's will, those sparks that seemed to be about to disappear, were everywhere in his true essence, burning fiercely. Killing intent and madness surged in this palace. But Yuanwu could not kill Jing Liuli even if he wanted to right now. The vital energy in his body had completely lost control. It did not seem like his vital energy, or Jing Liuli's vital energy, but seemed to have become Zheng Xiu's vital energy. Every drop of true essence in his body, every strand of true essence, was a destructive force to his body. His meridians were being burned, dried up, and turned to dust. Pew pew pew, amidst his mad roars and howls, many soft noises sounded from his body, as if someone was secretly farting. The vital energy in his body was being released from all the meridians that could release vital energy. He was personally dispersing his cultivation. He was forcing out all the vital energy in his body because even his body's intuition was screaming and reminding him that only this way would his body not be burned to dust. The powerful vital energy of the past, in the chaotic release, turned to flying dust. Jing Liuli retreated to a corner. Hundreds of streams of fire appeared in the space in front of her and Yuanwu. There seemed to be many burnt paper flowers dancing in the streams of fire, and more sparks were being formed. The golden light and black energy in the palace were disappearing. Other than the parts that had been burned away by the sparks, more of the reason was that Yuanwu could not control the formation here. Only Yuanwu could control the formation here, but he had lost his vital energy and the power to control the formation. What was the use of a cultivator who lost their vital energy? Jing Liuli slowly adjusted her breathing, and then she felt proud. Chapter 900. The streams of fire washed over the ground and the roof. The hard ground started to crack. The energy on the roof started to dissipate and then start to burn. Yuanwu sensed what was about to happen. He wanted to stop this from happening. He wanted to kill Jing Liuli, who was still in the hall, but he could not do it. What he needed to consider the most was his life and death. The star fire was filled with surging murderousness. The star fire that Zheng Xiu had left in his body danced around him, more vicious than ever. At this time, Jin Liuli's murderous intent stabbed into his mind. He finally understood that this young girl, who was publicly acknowledged as the most talented in cultivation in Changling, would not change her mind because of other people's thoughts. If she had the chance to kill him now, she would not hesitate. Jing Liuli thought the same. She knew that killing Yuanwu would remove the last obstacle to the unification of the world. It would save a lot of time and trouble. So at this time, she did not think about the sword leader token that Ding Ning had given her, or the battle between Ding Ning and Yuanwu. She wanted to try and kill Yuanwu directly. Amidst the lingering sparks, she slowly stood up. Yuanwu's eyes were filled with endless terror. Finally, after Ding Ning, he had another existence that filled him with terror. His body was bent over in the sparks, the moisture in his flesh and blood having evaporated quite a bit, appearing exceptionally withered. But at this moment, he finally squeezed out the last of his strength, thinking of the only way to save himself. There was a loud bang. A wall behind his dragon throne shattered. A lifeless figure charged into the sea of fire. This was Huang Jinwei. Or rather, the dead Huang Jinwei. Huang Jinwei's body landed in front of him. Then a sword essence formed, piercing through the sea of fire and heading towards Jing Liuli, who was already moving forward. Jing Liuli frowned deeply and slashed forward with her hand. Most of the sparks in the hall were drawn in at this moment, turning into countless sharp flaming swords, constantly stabbing towards Huang Jinwei's sword. Once again, a loud and muffled sound rang out in the palace, where the vital energy was already in a mess. Jing Liuli's tightly pursed lips spat out another mouthful of blood. Her body smashed through the door behind her and she was still sent flying backwards by the rush of air. Huang Jinwei's feet crushed the ground. His hand was holding Yuanwu, who was falling backwards, but he could not stop his retreat. The ground under his feet kept on exploding. He and Yuanwu were blasted out of the palace, out of the place where he had broken through the wall. The instant his figure retreated from this bedroom that was already burning under the abuse of the starfire collapsed with a loud rumble, rubble flying in all directions. The rubble burned with flames that were difficult to extinguish. Like lava from a volcanic eruption, the rubble fell into various parts of the brand new and magnificent palace at the foot of Mount Li. Flames sprang up everywhere, everywhere was ablaze. Many parts of Huang Jinwei's body started to burn. The fire burned his body, giving off the smell of roasted meat. Countless exclamations and air-piercing sounds rang out in the palace. Many cultivators landed. But when they saw Huang Jinwei and Huang Jinwei holding the unconscious Yuanwu, they could not help but tremble violently. Their hearts were filled with terror and bewilderment. They did not know if they should immediately go and put out the fire or do something else. Jing Liuli landed from the air. She flew back hundreds of feet, and when she landed, she could not control her body. She fell to the ground, covered in blood. Dozens of cultivators from the palace landed near her. Many sword lights swam in this space. At this time, these cultivators should have the ability to kill her. But no one acted. A young cultivator was closer to Jing Liuli than them. This young cultivator wore ordinary cloth robes, but he carried many swords on his back. The light of the fire clearly illuminated his determined and handsome features. This allowed these cultivators to easily recognize his identity. He was Dugu Bai. If he was just a young master of a marquis, even if they did not know what was happening, the cultivators of the palace would not let him and Jing Liuli leave so easily. However, when these cultivators were a bit distracted, a middle-aged man coughed lightly. Then, the instant they looked over, he nodded towards them, and then shook his head. This person was not Marquis Dugu, but another marquis of the Qin dynasty's 13 marquises. Also, all these cultivators understood what this marquis wanted to express in this moment. Nodding was a greeting to someone of high status like him. Shaking his head was a signal for them to not interfere and let Dugu Bai and Jing Liuli leave. As a result, the sword lights of these cultivators who were flying in this space drooped down powerlessly, their color dimming. These cultivators were certain of a rumor. The remaining marquises of Changling had all silently agreed to the conditions of the Basin Kendo ground. Multiple carriages were waiting for Dugu Bai and Jing Liuli outside Epang Palace. One of the carriages was very large and arrogant, as large as a house. This carriage originally belonged to the Changling Imperial Palace, and should have been used by Yuanwu. But when Dugu Bai helped Jing Liuli into the carriage, Jing Liuli saw many familiar faces. Qing Yaoyin was not the only one waiting to heal her. Bailey Sushue, Ding Ning, and even Xie Changsheng were waiting for her in the carriage. Jing Liuli first glanced at Xie Changsheng. Xie Changsheng immediately understood her meaning. He could not help but snort coldly. "Do not feel that I do not qualify to sit here and wait for you. Do not think that you are the one who has contributed the most in pushing these matters. You cannot imagine how great many of the things I have done are." Hearing his words, Jing Liuli thought seriously and then nodded. "That is true." Xie Changsheng's expression immediately eased. "Of course I have to come to watch today's matter." But he had not expected Jing Liuli to suddenly say coolly, "But I heard people say that you boast, that you may make me see you differently, and that I may fall in love with you." Xie Changsheng's face flushed slightly, and he felt extremely embarrassed. But he thickened his face and sneered. "Did I? Even if I did, it was because I was young and ignorant in the past, and had not seen the world." "Well done." When Jing Liuli ignored him and bowed to Bailey Sushue seriously returned the bow and said softly, "You trust me so much. You do not feel that I may work together with Yuanwu against you?" Jing Liuli turned to look at the smiling Ding Ning and said, "Only the weak will lower themselves. But even more importantly, even if you work together with Yuanwu, I feel that you may not be able to defeat me." Ding Ning smiled. "I actually borrowed Zheng Xiu's hand to kill Li Sihei and deal with Yuanwu. If there are people in the world that I admire, Zheng Xiu counts as one of them. Help me burn this palace, and let the fire burn brighter. I know you can do it." When she completely relaxed and closed her eyes to accept Qing Yaoyin's medicine, Jing Liuli said to Ding Ning. Chapter 901. For Ding Ning, this was not a request. Under Li Mountain, the palace that had been built purely because of Yuanwu's wishes was just a useless dead shell. Before this, Yuanwu had been hiding inside for a long time. And he was not willing for Yuanwu to hide inside. So Ding Ning nodded and closed his eyes. The moment he closed his eyes, a lot of invisible starlight drifting in the void fell down. The starlight was like fresh firewood to the burning sparks in the palace. At this time, in Epang Palace, many people started to put out the fire when they could not wait for the imperial order. They used all the water sources they could use. Many cultivators even used their vital energy and their flying swords. However, at this moment, these people were shocked to find that the flames that had been gradually extinguishing suddenly rose. These stars were like ghosts that came from the nether world. Water could not extinguish them, and earth could not extinguish them. In the span of a dozen breaths, these dots of fire on the eaves became a continuous fire that could not be stopped. The cultivators were terrified and dazed. Ordinary people were even more so. In this enormous palace under Li Mountain, other than the cultivators and the army, there were many craftsmen who maintained and repaired the palace, and many palace servants who were in charge of food and living. At this time, many people could not help but cry, especially those craftsmen who had worked hard to build this beautiful palace. Looking at this uncontrollable fire, their hearts ached. When many people cried, it was easier to affect each other's emotions. Someone could not help but cry out, "This must be the soul of the Empress coming back to claim our lives." "Shut up. This is treason. There is no such thing as a ghost in this world." Someone shouted loudly to stop, but his voice was trembling badly. Since they could not extinguish the fire, they could only leave this imperial palace that was about to burn everything. The soldiers and cultivators led the craftsmen and palace servants who could not resist the fire out of the palace in batches. In reality, outside the palace, on another path not far from Ding Ning's caravan, there were several carriages. The people in these carriages walked out and stood in front of the carriages. It grew brighter and brighter until the blazing flames illuminated their figures. One of them was as tall as a mountain and could only be Marquis Shu of Mount Heng. The other people stood shoulder to shoulder with him. Their statuses and presence did not lose to him. They were clearly not the other marquises of Changling, but the bureau chiefs of some departments. These people looked at the fire silently and motionlessly, only letting out a few long sighs. Logically speaking, when the imperial palace was burned to ashes, everyone should first consider the safety of the emperor. Yet, as these marquises watched with folded arms, very few people seemed to think about where Yuanwu was and how he was doing right now. The fire burned for an entire night. All of Changling was alarmed. Everyone could see the fire rising into the sky from the palace. The fire was still burning when morning came. Many people in Changling could not help but leave the city to see what was going on. The atmosphere in the imperial city of Changling was very strange. Many soldiers and cultivators were changing shifts, as if this was just a routine procedure. In the early morning light, some newly replaced soldiers and cultivators suddenly widened their eyes in shock. They saw some people calmly entering the palace. They recognized some faces among the people who were walking slowly as though they were sightseeing. Other than some cultivators of Minute Mountain Sword Sect, they also saw Ding Ning, they saw Shen Xian, they saw Yi Xileng and Chief Inspector Chen. Ding Ning had entered the Changling Imperial Palace. This should be extremely unusual and something that would shock the world. Yet, in this morning, it appeared so calm. No one stopped him as though everything was natural. No one stopped the Imperial city guards at the front. The soldiers and cultivators in the palace were so shocked they were numb. Especially when they saw their officers silently accepting all of this, they were even less likely to move. Ding Ning entered the court hall. Hu Hai, who had not woken up, rubbed his eyes as he entered the hall, escorted by some palace servants and officials. He did not know what had happened and thought that Zhao Jiao had returned to help him with political matters. When the figures of Ding Ning and the others appeared in his sight, he started to feel fear and screamed in fear. Shen Xian was behind Ding Ning. He softly said a few words. The voice was deep, but used vital energy to clearly reach Hu Hai's ears. The terrified Hu Hai suddenly calmed down. He looked at Ding Ning and Shen Xian, his eyes filled with obedience and respect. Shen Xian came closer to him and whispered a few words. Hu Hai nodded and had people start to write decrees. Large groups of officials arrived in the court hall. More and more people gathered. Yi Xileng and Chief Inspector Chen started to give orders to some of the officials. The Astrology Bureau and Divinity Bureau that had disappeared seemed to start to recover in just one morning. Decrees about the appointment, dismissal, and transfer of officials flowed out of the hall. Starting from this morning, the Basin Kendo ground started to officially take over the imperial city, all of Changling, and the world. Compared to the change of power many years ago before Yuanwu ascended the throne, this morning was very clean, and there was almost no blood. There were naturally many things to do in a full takeover. But Ding Ning did not need to consider these things. He had no interest in these court matters. He left the court hall that symbolized the center of power, and entered a cold palace. This cold palace was filled with plum blossoms. But these plum blossoms only bloomed in the cold winter near spring. At that time, even though the plum blossoms were warm and fragrant, the spring cold was bone-chilling. In the season when the plum blossoms did not bloom, this cold palace was bleak. Fu Su was under house arrest here. When he saw Ding Ning appear in front of him, and thought of the fire that could be seen even here after burning for a night, Fu Su's body trembled. He looked at Ding Ning's calm features and asked in a trembling voice, "Where is my father? He is not dead yet, but his cultivation should be crippled." Ding Ning looked at him and shook his head. He said, "I did not kill him because I said before that I would give him a fair fight to end his grievances. I will wait for him here, just like he waited for me in Changling back then. If his cultivation is crippled, he, How can he be a match for you? Fu Su's mind was blank. He instinctively said this. Ding Ning said coolly, regardless of whether he is a match for me, I will at least give him a chance to see me. Unlike back then, when I killed my way into Changling, he only dared to hide here, and did not even dare to speak in front of me. Chapter 902. He did not disguise his hatred. Many years ago, in Changling, he had many enemies. But many years later, his former enemies had either disappeared or died. Especially people like the Jiao Sword Furnace and the Wei Cloud Water Palace, who had become enemies due to the difference in dynasties, slowly became friends. Grudges were disappearing. But he loathed the culprit even more. The present Yuanwu was even more loathsome than many years ago when he had schemed to destroy the Basin Kendo ground. If his cultivation is crippled, will he still come to fight you? Fu Su was slightly dazed. Theoretically, he should stand on his father's side and care for Yuanwu's safety. But when he, who had been imprisoned here, heard that Yuanwu had killed Zheng Xiu, he could not understand his own emotions. The present Changling is no longer his Changling. There are not so many dynasties in the world. An unprecedented dynasty that has unified the world has formed. Whether he comes to fight me or not has nothing to do with him. He is no longer the emperor of this dynasty. Ding Ning looked at Fu Su and said, as to whether he will come to fight me, that is not something I need to consider. Fu Su swallowed with difficulty. He raised his head slightly to look at the gradually brightening sky. He understood that while this palace was still silent, the world outside was changing dramatically. A Qin dynasty that belonged to Yuanwu had ended, and an even stronger Qin dynasty had formed. The world was unified. That was such a shocking phrase, but now, it had really been done. He took a deep breath and was silent for a long time. Then he asked Ding Ning seriously, "What have you come to find me for?" "To take over the throne." Ding Ning said simply, "To become the emperor of this dynasty, and manage the people." Fu Su did his best to control his emotions, but his body could not help but tremble. Why? He did not feel joy, and looked straight into Ding Ning's eyes. "Give me a reason." "It is not as complicated as you imagine." Ding Ning also looked into his eyes and said softly, "You are the heir to the throne of this dynasty. If you take the throne, many people will not oppose fiercely, and fewer people will die. Another important reason is that you are very kind. Many officials have high hopes for you, so you should be able to manage this dynasty well." Fu Su's emotions were in turmoil, he could not speak. "You do not have much time to think. Right now, Changling is very calm because the orders of the bureaus and some edicts have not been sent out. If you do not take the throne, when the news spreads, the calm Changling will be like when Yuanwu attacked the Basin Kendo ground many years ago." Ding Ning shook his head mockingly. "Of course, the final winner will still be the Basin Kendo ground. It will still be a one-sided massacre. If you like to see such a scene happen, you can naturally ignore my request." Fu Su woke up from a strange dizziness. He heard clearly that Ding Ning had used the word request. He did not like killing, and he gradually understood Ding Ning's intentions. "Are you not worried that after I take the throne, I will take revenge for my parents?" He took a deep breath and asked Ding Ning softly. "Revenge?" Ding Ning smiled bitterly. "Zheng Xiu did not die at my hands. As to Yuanwu, even if he died at my hands, it was a fair duel. If you really hate me, you do not have great cultivation talent. You will be a good emperor, but you will not be the strongest cultivator in the world." Fu Su suddenly felt sad. Because he could not understand the grievances of the previous generation. In his view, the world had to be reasonable. Just like when he asked Ding Ning why he had him take the throne. And revenge had to be reasonable. But when he thought about the events of the past, he felt sorry for the Basin Kendo ground. "I hope that you will become an emperor throughout the ages, a good emperor praised by many generations of people, and not a good emperor in your own history books." Ding Ning bid farewell and left the cold palace. He met with some officials and told them the news that relieved them of a great burden. Then he personally went to the residences of some officials and promised and agreed to some things. Many people in the city still felt great enmity towards him, and did not believe that the Basin Kendo ground would not pursue the past after taking over the city. His personal appearance could not completely resolve this enmity, but no one would not believe the promises he made. Most importantly, the vast majority of the people in the city knew how to look at the big picture. Ding Ning believed that everything would become good. Soon, he would let these people see that Changling, the unprecedentedly powerful dynasty, did not belong to the Basin Kendo ground, but to the people of the world. He would also correct many of the mistakes he had made in the past. He believed that in the near future, the Chu, Qi, and Yang people who had lost their countries would not be treated unfairly. He, Lin Zhujiu, and the others became even busier than when they were in Jiaodong Commandery. They were so busy that they could not tell day from night. While he and everyone in the Basin Kendo ground were busy in Changling, Yuanwu woke up in his tent. No one seemed to care about him. Epang Palace had turned to ruins, but the fire was still burning. On a slope not far from the ruins of Epang Palace, some soldiers and cultivators loyal to him had set up tents. From here, they could clearly see the outline of Changling in the night. Yet even though it was so close to Changling, this place seemed to have become a cold and abandoned land. No army came. No court officials came. There were not even people delivering food and medicine. The entire world was changing dramatically, but no one paid attention to the people or matters in the tents. When Yuanwu opened his eyes, these soldiers and cultivators loyal to him did not feel any joy. Because all of these soldiers and cultivators knew that loyalty was just a thought, and could not change what had already happened. Yuanwu looked at the top of the black tent. His eyes were also black and empty. His meridians were empty. His soul seemed to be very light, as though it would fly out of his body. But his body was exceptionally heavy, so heavy he felt as though he was going to sink into the ground. He raised his hand. His hand was so heavy it seemed to be filled with thousands of pounds of lead. "Give me a sword." He did not look at anyone in the surroundings, and said in an empty tone. Chapter 903. No one knew what he meant when he said he needed a sword. But in the view of these soldiers and cultivators who were still loyal to him, even if he killed himself, he could save some face. So, a cultivator standing next to him silently handed over a sword. Yuanwu gripped the sword. The moment he held the sword in his hand, some life force seemed to return to his body. But his hand started to tremble at the same time. Too heavy. He looked at the sword and shook his head. "I need a lighter sword." This sword was called Clear End. It was not a standard sword of the Qin dynasty, but in the world of cultivators, this sword was not heavy. The surrounding soldiers and cultivators still did not understand what he was thinking, but hearing his words, a dozen swords were handed over. Among these swords, there were short swords as thin as cicada wings, 3-foot-long swords, and 7-foot-long swords. But the swords were extremely thin, and only 1/10 the weight of ordinary swords. Yuanwu glanced at these swords and gripped one of the yellow swords. This sword was called Shen wood. It was made from a kind of varja wood from an extremely cold place. After being polished, it was as sharp as refined gold, but it was 1/3 the weight of ordinary iron swords. Yuanwu gripped this sword and then stood up. This sword was like a walking stick to him at this time. But when he stood up and stopped trembling, the soldiers and cultivators around him still looked at him with admiration and admiration. Right now, Yuanwu did not have any vital energy in his body. To the world of cultivators, he was a cripple. But even so, the way he held the sword, the presence he used the sword with, was something that few people could match. Yuanwu waved the sword. There was a soft howl of wind in the air. The emptiness in Yuanwu's eyes disappeared slightly. He seemed to be alive again. He smiled self-deprecatingly. "This sword is called Thousand Mountain Wind. With this lonely one's past cultivation, even a palace would be sent flying. I had not thought that it could only create the sound of wind like the whimpering of an old dog." The soldiers and cultivators behind him were all distressed, some of them even sobbing. "You can leave." Yuanwu waved his hand lightly, indicating for these soldiers and cultivators to leave. "Your Majesty." The soldiers and cultivators raised their heads in shock. "What's the point of you staying?" Yuanwu just waved his hand and smiled disdainfully. In the end, it is not just between me and him. A cultivator heard Yuanwu's meaning and said with a change in expression, Holy One, Yuan Ding Ning. Yuanwu glanced at him, nodded, and interrupted him. Anyone could see that he had made up his mind. Anyone could tell that he didn't want to talk anymore. The soldiers and cultivators didn't say anything else. They all bowed and left. Only Yuanwu was left in the black tents. The entire world seemed to quiet down, as though only Yuanwu was left. There weren't many things in this temporary camp to begin with. When these soldiers and cultivators left, they didn't take much with them. When the wind blew at the tent door and gave off soft knocking sounds, Yuanwu looked out through the raised tent curtain and saw the metal pot on the fire basin that had been extinguished. Next to the metal pot, there were some dry rations piled up. There were dry and hard millet cakes, and dried beef and mutton. Yuanwu grimaced. There was a sound in his stomach. It was not caused by the flow of energy in the past, but just pure hunger. It had been many years since he felt so hungry, especially after he reached Realm 8. He rarely needed to eat like ordinary people. But even in his past cultivation, he had been very strict in his control of food and living. Most of what he ate were spirit medicines that were beneficial to cultivators. He walked out of the tent and started to make a fire. The flames rose and boiled the water in the metal pot. He cut some dried beef and mutton in. When it boiled again, he broke the millet cakes into pieces and threw them into the pot. Then he put in salt, and some wild grass that could increase the fragrance and color of the food. He had seen many of these in his past battles with the Han and Jiao Wei. While he rarely did it himself, he was not unfamiliar with it. He started to eat. Hunger was the source of all good food. This pot of crude and simple food was a taste that Yuanwu had not tasted for a long time. It was indescribably fragrant and sweet. It was easy for people to think about many things when they were full. For example, when they had strength, they would think about sex. For Yuanwu at this time, this pot of food that warmed him up made him think of the many beautiful things in the world, and gave him more courage to survive. If death was the final result, then this food could allow him to enjoy many beautiful things before he died. He touched his slightly bulging stomach and looked up in the direction of Changling. He smiled, and there was less bitterness and resentment in his smile. Instead, there was a sudden sharpness and viciousness in his smile. I have to thank you for forcing me to this step. He looked at Changling and said to himself with a smile, dissatisfaction comes from unwillingness to submit. Many years ago, I lived in your shadow. You naturally felt that I was mediocre, inferior to you in both strategy and cultivation. But I did not think so. I did not feel that I was weaker than you. I naturally had to prove that I was stronger than you. I could kill you. So you died, and I ascended the throne, and became the strongest emperor in the world. But I had not thought that the 9-death silkworm could revive you. In terms of cultivation, I did not have confidence back then. But when I crossed Realm 8, I was even more unconvinced. But I already had the world, and I did not dare to take the risk. I did not dare to take the risk because I was afraid of fighting you. Now that I have thought it through, I regret it. You and I should have used a duel like this to end things. Back then, when you entered Changling and became famous, I should have fought you. I did not dare in the past, I was afraid in the past, but this did not mean that I felt I was not as good as you, really could not compare to you. I was unconvinced. Now that I have nothing, what do I have to be afraid of? I have the confidence to fight you now, and try to kill you. Yuanwu slowly stood up. He held the sword and started to walk. He did not have vital energy now. It was easy to get tired walking to Changling like this, but he would rather do so. The more so, the faster he could adapt and get used to the feeling of not having vital energy. Ding Ning said to everyone in the world to give him a chance to fight fairly. Then he would go to Changling now, and have a fair fight with Ding Ning. Since he was a cripple without vital energy, then Ding Ning naturally had to clear out all the vital energy in his body. Chapter 904. The fire in Epang Palace had not been extinguished. Yuanwu seemed to have been purposefully forgotten by the world. But since it was purposeful, it meant that he had not been completely forgotten, and was purposefully ignored. When he moved now, the entire world paid attention to him. In Changling, the fat Mount Hung Marquis Shu heard the news. He was stunned for a few breaths, and then pushed open the window that was enormous for ordinary people. But he still felt slightly stuffy. He drank a pot of herbal tea, looked at a sycamore tree in his residence, and sighed deeply. That sycamore tree had grown in his courtyard on a spring many years ago. The seeds had been blown by the wind, or the roots had been mixed in with the soil transported from elsewhere to fill in the garden. That spring, a very young cultivator had walked into Changling for the first time with a sword on his back. He had been stopped by a city guard general who had purposely made things difficult for him. That general had become the first target of that young cultivator's challenge. That young cultivator who had not been famous at the time was Wang Jingmeng. Every year, every season, many young cultivators of his age would come to Changling in search of food and a chance to become famous. But who would have thought that an outsider like that would stir up the world? Like Mount Hung Marquis Shu, there were many other Changling nobles who were filled with such emotions. They knew that when Zheng Xiu died, when Xu Fu and Bai Qi abandoned Yuanwu, the outcome was decided. But when this moment came, they felt like they had drunk a cup of cold tea in the cold weather. They were filled with emotions that even they could not describe. No one deliberately concealed the news that Yuanwu was returning to Changling. Soon, the entire city knew. Of course, everyone still wanted to see the spectacle, and the battle between Yuanwu and Ding Ning. But compared to Zheng Xiu and Yuanwu's duel, Changling was not as noisy. Most people were like Mount Hung Marquis Shu, sighing inexplicably. The true story could not be hidden even if the history books were burned. When Yuanwu said that Ding Ning was that person's rebirth, the story of that person and the Basin Kendo ground spread through the streets as the Divinity Bureau and the Astrology Bureau disappeared. So even the young people who had not experienced that period of time, or the Qin people who later moved to Changling, knew the story of the past. The more stories there were, the clearer the images of those who had disappeared. Everyone had their own judgment of right and wrong. But no matter what, in the past decade, the Qin dynasty had been the strongest dynasty in the world, and Yuanwu the strongest emperor in the world. His cultivation had been crippled and he had returned to royal city alone. The feeling he gave off was as bleak as the early winter wind blowing through his body. The entire city waited quietly. A wind suddenly blew through Changling. This wind came from Falling Parasol. When many people who lived close to Falling Parasol turned to look at that alley, they saw a gentle wind blowing out of that alley with visible starlight. Everyone guessed the answer, and they were shocked speechless. Ding Ning was emptying the Zhenyuan in his body. He had said that he would give Yuanwu an absolutely fair chance to duel. He would not go back on his word. For him, he had waited many years for this meeting with Yuanwu. He had much more vital energy than ordinary cultivators. So the wind from here blew through the entire city, and even blew away the parasol leaves of the Hung Mountain Marquessate establishment. A sword light came out of his hand. The Great Punishment Sword was the strongest and best sword he could find in the world. But after forcing Yuanwu to this step, he naturally did not want to rely on this sword to take advantage of Yuanwu in a duel like this. He was not too careless or deliberate, and did not use the last flower sword. The last flower sword was too short. Without using vital energy, he could not use the characteristics of the last flower sword. Among the cultivators of the Basin Kendo ground in the past, some had swords similar to Yuanwu's present sword. A long sword also made from Vaja wood was delivered to his courtyard. Yuanwu's sword was called Black Wood, and his sword was called Gold Breaker. When all the vital energy flowed out of his meridians, his energy sea became empty. Ding Ning drank a bowl of clear water and left with this sword. The caravan waiting for him in Falling Parasol was very long. No one wanted another accident to happen. So, almost all the grandmasters of the Basin Kendo ground and Minute Mountain sword sect were gathered in these caravans. Or rather, the strongest grandmasters in the world were all waiting in these caravans, including Jing Liuli, Bai Shanshui, Zhao Sai, and Zhao Yi. Many years ago, when all the experts of the world had come to Changling to kill Wang Jingmeng, these people were all protecting Ding Ning. Unless Yuanwu could kill Ding Ning in a duel, no one in the world, no army, could kill Ding Ning. The presence of these experts in the caravan more or less changed the flow of primal energies in the world. As the caravan moved, the air was filled with strange light. The flickering shadows appeared unreal. More and more people flooded out of the streets. They followed the caravan but did not get too close in fear of disturbing the caravan's progress. The caravan went out of the city to the Wei River. There was empty space here, and the terrain was low. From the surrounding hills, one could clearly see this duel. Many years ago in Changling, most cultivator duels were arranged here. This way, they would not damage the houses or the fields. In the distance, on the road facing the caravan, a person walked over alone with a sword. Countless people who were standing still on the river saw this scene clearly. Countless memories were instantly evoked in their hearts, stirring up countless storms. Yuanwu had come. The caravan scattered. Ding Ning was left standing alone in the grass on the riverbank. The people on the hills closest to the caravan were naturally important people of Changling, people who had experienced the events of the past. For example, marquises like Marquis Shu of Mount Heng. For some reason, when they saw Yuanwu walk over, and saw the final meeting between Yuanwu and Ding Ning, they suddenly felt some tiredness and relaxation. They also felt that this ending of grievances was perfect. Ding Ning looked coolly at Yuanwu's approaching figure. His eyes were slightly cold, but in the end, they became indifferent. Looking at Yuanwu, who finally walked in front of him, he said in a light tone with slight disgust, "You can rest. You can start whenever you want." Yuanwu's hair was soaked in sweat and stuck to his forehead. He looked more disheveled than at any other time, especially when countless people were looking at him. But when he looked at the person he should hate the most, he smiled. Based on the customs of Changling, shouldn't the two sides of a duel say something? He looked into Ding Ning's eyes with a hint of madness. "Even if you do not want to talk to me, there are some things I cannot say without speaking." Ding Ning also looked into his eyes and said, "What do you want to say?" Yuanwu slowly said, "I think I understand when I started to hate you." Chapter 905. Did one need a reason to hate someone? Of course. Ding Ning looked at Yuanwu and slowly looked up. He said, "I want to hear your reason." Yuanwu said, "Because of Zhang Xiu." Ding Ning's brow furrowed deeply. He had not expected Yuanwu to say such simple words at a time like this. Yuanwu was still smiling, but there was much more bitterness in his smile. "In the beginning, I hated many things about you. I hated your self-righteousness, I hated your arrogance, I hated your special talent, I hated your martial prowess that surpassed the cultivators of this world, and I hated the threat you posed to this dynasty and my throne. I hated your achievements that shocked the emperor, I hated your arrogance. All of these things had reasons for me to hate you." Yuanwu reached out and used his sleeve to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Then he said, "Originally, I did not care about the reasons for hating you. These reasons were enough for me. But the true reason was that I did not want to and was not willing to admit it. After I truly lost her, I was willing to admit that the reason I hated you the most was because of her." Yuanwu looked mockingly at Ding Ning. At this time, he did not have a dispirited and powerless expression. His face seemed to light up. He turned to look at the surface of the Wei River and slowly said, "Back then, when Zhang Xiu came to Changling, she was such a beautiful and special woman. Even when I saw her for the first time, I loved her deeply. If not for you, she would have naturally become the empress. But because of you, I didn't have the chance to express my love for her before she got together with you and became your lover. Of course, I still won in the end. She betrayed you and became my empress. Along the way, she buried the Basin Kendo ground. However, when I thought about how she wasn't a virgin, and how you were her first man, I couldn't understand why she only needed the position of empress after betraying you, and that I was still incomparable to you in her heart. I felt like there was a fishbone stuck in my throat all these years. I am not a pedantic person. For the country, how could I not know how to untie these knots? However, in the end, he couldn't open it and killed her with his own hands. It's not because I've been too afraid of her all these years. In fact, I just want her to be a wife who loves me. It's just that I really care about her. It turns out that what I love the most in this world is not the throne, nor is it the reputation of unifying the world. It is her. Yuanwu's smile grew dimmer. But by the time I admit this, it is already too late. Ding Ning's eyes grew colder and colder. He shook his head and said, "It's your business whether you want to admit it or not. But you ruined me and the Basin Kendo ground because of this, and then you ruined her. Is this someone else's fault? I'm just telling you that when she died in front of me, everything was ruined for me. My life and my dynasty have been utterly destroyed. I have nothing left. I have avenged you, and now it is time for me to take my revenge." Yuanwu put away his smile and shook his head coldly. "So this duel is a fair one for you. If you kill me, it is over. But for me, it is not so. Even if I can kill you, I will not live. If I risk my life to kill you, I will have a chance to kill you." Ding Ning raised the sword in his hand and slowly held it across his chest. He said, "Other than this, do you have anything else to say, or are these your last words?" Yuanwu also raised the sword in his hand. "In reality, I have waited for this day for a long time." Dozens of pieces of grass shot out from the ground between the two as he spoke. Both he and Ding Ning did not have any vital energy in their bodies right now. Naturally, they could not cause these pieces of grass to appear because of the vibrations in their presence. What caused these pieces of grass to fly out was their footsteps. Even without the support of vital energy, the two's physical strength was not something ordinary people could compare to. Their footsteps were as fast as the wind, and they immediately left after images in the air. Ding Ning's body was lighter, and his speed was faster than Yuanwu's. When he lost the support of vital energy, his sword moves became very direct. As he moved, his long sword naturally stabbed out. With a perfect posture, he naturally stabbed towards Yuanwu's chest. The tip of the sword pierced through a piece of grass and arrived in front of Yuanwu. Yuanwu was not as fast as Ding Ning, but facing this sword, what appeared on his face was not terror, but a mad cold smile. He did not dodge at all, and this sword did not seem to exist in his eyes. He twisted his body like he was swinging a blade, and then swung his sword towards the incoming Ding Ning. Cries of surprise rang out from the mound. Regardless of whether it was the two's previous conversation or the current exchange, many people on the river could hear and see clearly. Yuanwu's sword move was extremely clear. He wanted to kill both Jade and Stone. He wanted to die, and kill Ding Ning at the same time. Even if Ding Ning's swordsmanship far surpassed Yuanwu's, it was still very disadvantageous for Ding Ning in a battle like this. Ding Ning took a deep breath. Even in such a situation, he was still able to take a deep breath. Then, his entire body fell backwards like a firewood that had been chopped down. Yuanwu's sword light slashed above him. Yuanwu's reaction was not slow. With a low shout, the sword light turned and slashed downwards. But in this moment, Yuanwu's eyes felt a stabbing pain, and he could not help but shout in pain. Ding Ning's movements were faster than his. The moment he fell back, Ding Ning's sword hit the grass and gravel that he had kicked into the air. He accurately slapped this wave of dust onto Yuanwu's face. He relied purely on his flesh and blood to exert power, but just the rotation of his body, the vibration of his wrist, and the slapping of the gravel caused Yuanwu's face to be covered in bloody marks. Taking advantage of the moment Yuanwu closed his eyes, Ding Ning's left hand pressed against the ground. His body suddenly spun to the side like a spinning top. A wave of coldness reached Yuanwu's ankle. Yuanwu instinctively realized what was about to happen. He did not have time to open his eyes, or chase after Ding Ning. As he screamed in pain, he swung his sword down to block the sinister sword that was slashing at his ankle. However, his sword still blocked empty air. Ding Ning's sword had been pulled back. The moment he forced his eyes open, a sword light stabbed towards his left abdomen like a snake. Ding Ning stood sideways with one foot just touching the ground, like an ape standing on a branch on a dangerous cliff with one foot. This was a sword move from the White Ape Sword Manual, from the White Ape Sword School of Changling. Chapter 906. This sword move was very ordinary and not beautiful to look at, but it stretched the arm to the extreme. Anyone who understood this sword move would feel stunned because Ding Ning had used the agility of this sword to the extreme. Yuan Wu still wanted to use a method where both sides would be injured. This way, he could make up for the use of sword moves. Yuan Wu did not think that he could win against Ding Ning in terms of countering moves. But at this time, Yuan Wu was certain that when the other's sword tip touched his body, no matter what method he used, his sword could not touch Ding Ning's body. So he could only dodge or block this sword. If he dodged, he could encounter more sword moves. So Yuan Wu shouted angrily. His sword moved like a flower as he met Ding Ning's attack head-on. Ding Ning shook his head gently. Yuan Wu's sword moved like an after-image as he pulled back his sword. Ding Ning's body lightly jumped to Yuan Wu's left. His body swayed like a willow in the wind. Even without the support of vital energy, his sword still stabbed 4 times. 4 sword lights lit up in the air. If the sword was fast enough, it could deceive people's eyes and senses. These 4 swords had clearly stabbed out one after the other, but people could not tell which sword came first. This was another move from the sword manual of the Willow Sword School, a second-rate cultivation place in Changling. But no one had expected that such a sword move could follow the sword moves of the White Ape Sword manual, and be so smooth it was perfect. A sword screen lit up in front of Yuan Wu. Yuan Wu's wrist was so nimble it seemed boneless. His body did not move as he let the sword in his hand block these 4 sword lights like a peacock spreading its tail. But there was still no sound of swords meeting. His sword still missed. Ding Ning's body passed by his side. In this moment, Ding Ning's sword did not cut directly at his body, but the tip of the sword kicked up a wave of dirt on the ground and threw it at his back. Yuan Wu's heart burned with even fiercer anger. His feet suddenly exerted strength, and he twisted his body. His sword spun, and he held it horizontally to block this piece of dirt. However, he did not block this piece of dirt. This piece of dirt followed the sword and did not come straight at him. Instead, it spun strangely. When it approached him, it drew an arc and passed by the sword in front of him. With a muffled sound, it hit Yuan Wu's chest. Uncontrollable cries of surprise rang out. Yuan Wu felt pain in his chest and his breathing stopped. Even without any true essence, this piece of dirt still carried a considerable amount of force. But compared to the pain, what Yuan Wu could not endure was the feeling of humiliation. The slightly wet mud splattered on his chest, and a lot of mud splattered onto his chin and face. Ding Ning was standing silently on the ground less than 2 feet away from him. Taking advantage of Yuan Wu's difficulty in breathing, he was slowly adjusting his breathing. Regardless of whether it was the world of ordinary warriors or the world of cultivators, those who had time to rest and adjust their breathing would naturally be able to fight for a longer period of time. Yuan Wu recovered his breathing. His breathing could not help but become heavy. He and Ding Ning had only exchanged a few blows, but his sword could not even touch Ding Ning's sword. No matter how dissatisfied he was extremely clear. In terms of the use of sword moves and combat experience, he could not compare to Ding Ning. Ding Ning slowly looked up. His gaze passed Yuan Wu's head and looked at the sky above Changling. He said coolly, "Now, you should understand. Some things are not as you think. The world you think of and the real world will always be very different. Just like how you think you can fight me. Just like how you feel that without me, you and Zheng Xiu will become the perfect male and female leads in this world. But this is not the case." Ding Ning shook his head indifferently. "Even if I entered Changling later, maybe Zheng Xiu became the empress at the first moment, but later, maybe Zheng Xiu betrayed you and took your throne. Many things may not have happened as you thought." Yuan Wu's sword-holding hand trembled slightly. He did not know how to argue. This world is very cruel. Even if you treat people well with all your heart, they may not treat you well. In this life, you are waiting to meet the right person. Ding Ning said softly with disdain. Also, you cannot even treat people well with all your heart. No matter to your friends or the people you love, you are so fake, so conflicted, so fake and conflicted that it is disgusting. After saying this, Ding Ning attacked with his sword. He had no sympathy for people he truly hated, and did not want to give them a good ending. His sword did not fall towards Yuanwu's body, but the ground in front of him. His body, however, was retreating backwards. Using his feet to step, the tip of the sword slid up the footprints he left behind and flicked upwards. Pieces of dirt flew up rapidly as his sword moved, and fell towards Yuanwu's body like pieces of sword. This did not seem like a fight between powerful swordsmen, but like children playing in the mud. But as Ding Ning's sword path changed, these pieces of dirt that had been kicked up had different trajectories in the air. Some were like arrows, some were like tiles spinning on the water, some fell from the sky, and some were like flying weapons, spinning strangely in the air. Yuanwu could not avoid all of these pieces of dirt. He could not ignore these pieces of dirt and charge towards Ding Ning. The power of the previous wave of dirt made him understand that he could not keep up with Ding Ning's footsteps and get close to him if he endured the impact of the dirt. So he took a deep breath, and swung his sword to defend. But in the next moment, he found it hard to breathe. His sword cut apart the pieces of dirt that flew over. The dirt turned to dust, obscuring his vision, and causing large amounts of dust to charge into his nose. He could not help but cough. A piece of dirt cut across his face. A stream of fresh blood flowed down his face. More dirt fell on his body. More wounds appeared on his body, and more blood flowed down. The gasps on the river had completely disappeared. The world became completely silent. There was only the soft sound of the dirt being crushed, and the sound of the hard edges of the dirt cutting through clothing and flesh. Yuanwu shouted. He started to furiously swing his sword and sprint towards Ding Ning. But Ding Ning still calmly dodged and retreated. At this time, everyone understood Ding Ning's intentions. He only used the simplest sword moves of Changling to make Yuanwu understand many truths. Then he put Yuanwu in the same hopeless situation that Wang Jingmeng had been in many years ago. No matter how he fought, he could not reach his true opponent. He could not even touch the other's clothes. Yuanwu was being cut into pieces by the most ordinary dirt in the world. Without the support of vital energy, the more blood flowed, the faster his energy disappeared, and the slower his movements and reactions. Yuanwu felt the sun grow brighter and brighter, but his vision blurred. A piece of dirt cut across his knee. With a puff, blood mixed with flesh and blood splattered out. He could no longer maintain his balance and knelt down. Chapter 907. The sword was still in his hand. But when Yuanwu raised this sword, he could not touch any more enemies. Am I going to die? Yuanwu was covered in blood and mud. His hair was also covered in this and its color could not be seen. He looked up, his dim eyes looking at Ding Ning who had walked in front of him. His heart was filled with confusion, but for some reason, he changed his tone. This lonely one has dominated for a lifetime. Am I going to die like this? Ding Ning looked at him and did not respond. He just nodded. This lonely one is really going to die. Yuanwu laughed. His laughter was shrill and his expression was strange. This is this lonely one's dynasty. There are countless of this lonely one's people around. They are allowing me to die here? Ding Ning said coldly. Because this is very fair. How can there be true fairness in this world? Yuanwu murmured. This lonely one was born as the emperor, and you were born as this lonely one's people. Ding Ning said, there is naturally fairness in people's hearts. More blood flowed out of Yuanwu's body. He felt that he was stuck to the world. But in his sight, the sky was darkening, so dark that he could not see Ding Ning. He finally understood that he had reached the end of his life. This lonely one has not suffered losses in this life. He felt like crying, but he forced himself to look up in the direction Ding Ning was standing. This lonely one has obtained the world, and has become the emperor destined to be recorded in the history books. This lonely one has unified the lands, and most of the merit will be recorded in this lonely one's account. Also, this lonely one has obtained the woman that this lonely one wants to become the empress. Ding Ning did not respond to Yuanwu's words. Because at this time, Yuanwu's presence had been cut off. This enemy that had changed his life was dead. No matter what he said, Yuanwu could not hear him. As to the life of this enemy, it would be discussed in the future stories and history books. The river was silent for a long time. Some people started to cry. Some people cried because they thought of the good of this emperor, and thought that they had received favors due to some of Yuanwu's orders. Some people cried inexplicably out of fear of the future changes. A gust of wind blew from all directions. The wind came from all directions and flowed towards Ding Ning's body. With Ding Ning's thought, the qi of heaven and earth began to flow back into Ding Ning's body. The wind moved Yuanwu's body. He fell heavily into the mud in front of him. This was the end of years of grudges. In the carriage, Yi Xileng looked at this scene. She should have been one of the strongest women in Changling, but when she thought of the many things that had happened in the past, her eyes could not help but redden. The most relaxed person in the carriage was Xie Changsheng. Looking at the dead Yuanwu, he was silent for a few breaths and then asked Jing Liuli and the others in the carriage how to deal with his funeral, burn his bones and scatter his ashes, or bury him here. No one paid him any attention. Ding Ning stood quietly on the riverbank for a long time. Once this matter was done, he would no longer have any obsession in this city. He looked at Yuanwu's corpse and thought that in the end, Yuanwu would have felt that many of the things he had fought for were so boring, and not things he truly cared about. Ding Ning returned to the carriage. The caravan left and dispersed. The people who had come out of the city also slowly dispersed. In reality, Yuanwu was the only unstable factor. When Yuanwu died, everything was calm and natural. Most people in Changling did not know how Yuanwu's corpse was taken care of. The Basin Kendo ground was not cared for, but there was no grand burial. The soldiers and officials loyal to Yuanwu must have chosen this place to bury him. Many days later, Fu Su officially ascended the throne and became the new emperor. Dozens of days later, Bai Qi and some of his subordinates returned to Changling. The news that Bai Qi had betrayed the dynasty disappeared without a trace. With Bai Qi's return, the world was at peace. Chu, Yang, and Qi had disappeared, and what came after was an unprecedented unified dynasty. A long time later, measurement and currency were unified. As many pardons and some generous laws were passed down, even the people of Chu, Yang, and Qi accepted these changes at astounding speed. Reminiscing about your homeland? Rebelling against Qin? Everyone has land to farm, everyone has houses to live in. What is not good, what is there to worry about? In the next spring in Jiaodong Commandery, in a tavern, the ravings of a drunk merchant from Qi represented the thoughts of most people. After the world was unified, the benefits were clear. It wasn't just that it was more convenient to do business, the flow of goods was smoother, and the goods that had been scarce in the dynasties could be easily bought. Even more importantly, there were fewer bandits. The caravans that passed through the original borders became safe. This merchant who had come from Qi and brought many hides to Jiaodong Commandery to bring back many dried fish and herbs fell drunk in the spring wind. Not far away, an alley by the sea suddenly became lively. Fresh flowers floated, gongs and drums shook the sky. They were holding a joyous occasion. Many children ran barefoot out of their houses with the adults to see the excitement. They were shocked to see many large ships coming from the sea. What kind of large family is marrying their daughter to have such grandeur? These ignorant people clicked their tongues in wonder. In an inn that was very close to the alley, there were many officials with serious expressions gathered in one of the best rooms. These officials came from Changling. They knew that this was the most important wedding in the world. It was the wedding of Ding Ning and Zhongsun Qianxue. Now, in those large ships, other than the renowned grandmasters, there were many experts from even further away. The kingdoms outside the Yin Mountain had already sent envoys. Even though Ding Ning did not concern himself with court matters after leaving Changling, all of the Changling nobility knew that there were some things that had to satisfy Ding Ning. An urgent secret letter was sent to this room. After reading the contents of the letter, the leading official smiled. The Holy One has conferred Huang Jinwei the title of Duke of Wei River. See the memorial hall, and bury him in Dongling. Hearing his words, the gathered officials heaved a sigh of relief and felt a sense of relief. A few days ago, when they learned that Ding Ning and Zhongsun Qianxue had disappeared from their wedding, they also heard Ding Ning ask about Huang Jinwei's burial. For Changling, while Ding Ning's whereabouts were uncertain most of the time, and he spent most of his time traveling overseas, the matters he mentioned and cared about were truly important. In the bridal room, the red candles were swaying. Outside the bridal room, a group of half-drunk people were still drinking and fooling around. Ding Ning lifted the bride's red veil. While Zhongsun Qianxue was used to all kinds of situations, at this time, she blushed. This was the most beautiful bride in the world. Ding Ning was dazed. Is it beautiful? Laughter sounded on the roof. Zhongsun Qianxue stomped her feet in anger and embarrassment. Ding Ning looked up and laughed. Beautiful, I can't get enough. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.